Good afternoon. We'll convene this hearing, but we'll wait a moment for these folks to sign in and get the records going here. Are you recording? Okay. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Caldwell Hearing Examiner for November 9th, 2022. I serve in both a decision-making capacity and an advisory capacity to the mayor and city council. There are two types of public hearings that this commission conducts. The first is a legislative hearing whereby we formulate recommendations on certain land use requests. My recommendations are then forwarded on to the city council, who makes the decision on legislative matters. The second type of public hearing is quasi-judicial in nature, meaning that the requests are specific to a parcel of land. I am authorized to make decisions on requests for special use permits, variances, preliminary plat time extensions, and planned unit developments that do not involve subdivision of land. However, any decision I may make today is by no means final. Anyone that believes he or she has been aggrieved by my decision has a right to file an appeal to the city council. On quasi-judicial requests that involve the subdivision of land, rezones, and annexation, I am authorized to only make recommendations to the city council, who will make the decision. The hearing procedures, as required by the Idaho Code, are as follows. 1, the staff will first present a report on the application. 2, the applicant or the applicant's representative will then present the summary of the request. 3, testimony of those in support will be taken, followed by testimony from those in neutral position, followed by those in opposition. 4, I will allow the applicant or applicant's representative rebuttal. 5, after the rebuttal testimony is given, public testimony is closed, and no new oral or written testimony will be allowed unless I elect to reopen the testimony. The time limits for testimony are as follows. The applicant shall receive 10 minutes. Those in favor, those neutral, and those opposed will receive 5 minutes of testimony time, and the rebuttal will be for 5 minutes. I accept oral and written testimony from those in attendance, but only if you sign the sign-up sheet to speak. When testifying before me, you must come at the podium, state your full name and address, and give the truthful testimony. I ask everyone to treat all parties with fairness and respect. I will not tolerate any outbursts. And will those in the audience please turn off your cell phones and electronic devices. I'm a volunteer hearing commissioner and receive a small compensation for my efforts. I am charged by law to keep a clear record of the proceedings, consider factual testimony, and to stay within the city's and state's rules and regulations. We, the city staff, thank you for your courtesy to us and to others as we move through the process. With that, we'll move to today's agenda. The first item on the agenda was to approve the October 27th hearing examiner meeting minutes. They are still pending, so we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We have sign in for this one? No, they're signing in for another one. Okay. The first item on the agenda is PUD 22-00006, sub 22-00034, continue from October 27th, hearing examiner meeting, request by Bob Unger Enterprises on behalf of Meadowlark or Meadowdale Investments LLC. With that, I would ask the staff to make a presentation, please. I will note at this point, I received an exhibit, the PowerPoint, Mr. Dave Witt, for this case. This will be labeled Exhibit PUD 22-6-1. With that, Mr. Jones, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. We'll get started with this. So the request that we have here today is the approval of a 39 residential townhome lots as a PUD/subdivision. This parcel is located on the corner of North 3rd Avenue and North Illinois Avenue here in Caldwell. Just to talk more about the project's location, we're looking at a 4.55 acre project located on the corner of North 3rd Avenue and North Illinois Avenue. Just to get our bearings, this is east of the Boise Valley Monument Company on Illinois. Zoning for this use is zoned R3, high density residential, with surrounding uses of M1, R2, and R1. For the comprehensive plan, this is comped as high density residential, which is suitable for higher density residential lots like this. The proposed density is 8.5 dwelling units per acre. And as I said before, this is consistent with the 2040 comp plan. First, we'll go with surrounding land uses. Here's a picture of the subject site. The star is where the picture is being taken from, and you can see the point of view from there. To the west, we have Boise Valley Monument. To the east, we have some residential on top of the hill. And to the southwest, we have more residential past a little bit of a blank lot. Here we have the proposed site plan. This is with 39 townhome lots, with most of those being 4 units in a row, with 1 3-unit on the north side, west from this picture. With their proposed landscape plan, this is shown in 2 different sections. Here is the north section, which shows their main open space with gazebos, a barbecue pit, and pathway, along with their landscaping. This is their southern portion, so this will be the landscaping and landscape buffer along the townhomes. Utilities are available out here. Let's see. They'll have to connect to city water and sewer. There are connections available in the streets. They have a emergency access to the north of the site. If we look at their site plan, where the hammerhead is on the left of that image, that will be a emergency access only with bollards. For notification, the Planning and Zoning Department did not receive any public agencies. The Engineering Department had no comments, and besides frontage improvements and ADA compliance if there are any dilapidated sidewalks or curbs or gutters. On 10/19, we received a letter from neighbor David Witt with concerns about the development affecting his property. That the citizen will be speaking on this later. That is the one who gave you that presentation that we entered as a late exhibit. And for findings, we find that this is an appropriate land use. It is a high density development, comp plan wise, that is what would be here. Zoning wise, that is what is allowed. This is an allowed use with the planned unit development and subdivision. We find that it is in harmony and consistent with the comp plan. And with public agencies, we found no objections. So staff recommends approval and is subject to the 9 conditions as specified in section 10 of the staff report. I stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. First question is the staff report submitted in this packet the same as the one for the previous hearing?
There is a slight update from the previous hearing. It was going to be entered as a late exhibit, but as it was continued, I updated the staff report. It's just the only difference is the extra turnaround when you look at this image at the very northern portion. That is the only difference when it comes to
Um,
site plans.
Explain that to me, the extra turnaround, I thought that, was that hammerhead in the original drawing? Is that what we're talking about?
There are two hammerheads now. Let's see if the laser pointer is going to work there. So if you're looking at the image, if you're looking at the top right corner,
Okay,
was an added hammerhead that was required by engineering, and so the applicant complied with that requirement and added that hammerhead. That is for fire turnaround.
thank you. I didn't pick up on that. And on this subject, you said there'd be bollards on the hammerhead on the north end, is that correct?
Correct.
To limit ingress egress to emergency vehicles only?
Correct.
Ms. McDonald, could you comment on that as far as why that wouldn't be an open access? Or what's the discussion on that?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, because of the size of this development, a secondary access for the public is not necessary, so they would just use one access point. But the fire department does require a secondary access for emergency services. So that would be the purpose of that secondary access that is closed off to the public but available to them.
Thank you. Mr. Jones, I have a few more questions. And you didn't, the presentation you had an analysis that I didn't see in the staff report. Is that correct? Your conclusion, the last 2 pages of your presentation? Was that in the text of the staff report? Yeah, the findings, and I think the one before that. Is that part of the text?
This is something new that we're doing with this. I don't believe this is in the staff report at the moment. Besides, for comp plan,
Okay, well, I will request that you add this to the staff report,
Okay.
make it part of the staff report. So, in the under the previous page too, I'm looking at both staff reports under the zoning ordinance, plan unit developments. The item 2A1, development offers a maximum choice of living environments by allowing a variety of housing types. So what varieties are present here? It's not really clear to me. There's a fourplex and a triplex. Is that the variety?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, that would be the variety. It doesn't fit the category very comfortably. It's a very loose definition of a variety of homes.
Yeah, the ordinance instructs us to make finding for 2 or more of the following. There are other findings can be made. That one I'd say does not present, does not satisfy that condition. I'll just go down the list. Item 2, mixed use, that doesn't apply. Item 3, the development provides a layout which preserves and properly utilizes natural topography and geologic features, trees, etc. I say that's a yes. They are dealing with a very difficult topography there and trying to make the best of it. Item 4, the staff has noted that they fulfill that condition, and same with item 5. So I've got a 3 out of a 5 yes, which meets the purpose statement of the PUD. the, uh, going down the list here, we have development standards. It's on page 3 of the staff report, discretionary powers, about the, could you discuss the, in the second, at the end of the second line, the imaginative and unique concepts, innovations, and designs, which shall be incorporated, how are those addressed?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, with this site, there's gonna have to be quite a bit of imagination on trying to make everything fit properly and be usable. With, if you look at the site itself, it's very constrained. There's gonna have to be a lot of work done by the developer to make this a livable community with leveling out land, making sure the elevations are correct, and that all open space is usable. I think this could be this site's not very easy to work with, and if done correctly, this could be a very nice development that's quite unique here in this area, dealing with all these canals that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'd like to go back to item 5 under PUD purpose statements, A5. It talks about infill. In your opinion, this does constitute an infill development?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That speaks to other parts of the code. I tend to agree with that. So I'm just going down. One of the criteria for a PUD is ownership. Do you know if this is under single ownership?
That would be a better question for the applicant, I believe.
Thank you. I'll ask about that. So in the same section, this is page 5 of the previous staff report. Required amenities. One is the 5-foot wide asphalt paved micro pathway. Is that in there?
That would be that pathway right there.
The curved path?
Yeah, the curving, arching pathway with the trees
Okay.
around it.
Thank you. Then it talks about an 8-foot wide asphalt paved concrete horse service, major pathways on the side of major pathways. This is item 2, and they met those criteria as well for the amenities.
That curving pathway might actually be the 8-foot one. We'll have to clear that up with the applicant. But with this size, they are also able to reduce the amount of amenities they are required.
Okay. And moving on, they have amenities, but they're not particularly from the list of amenities under item B. The same section of the ordinance, we have B, required amenities, 4 more following amenities, so forth. So the only one that correlated to the list was a playground tot lot. The remaining amenities, gazebo, picnic tables, grills, benches. So does this fulfill that requirement B for 4 from that list?
Staff believes that the gazebos, picnic tables, and grills are appropriate since they can be used by the community.
Okay, and are they on this landscape plan, excuse me, are they shown on the landscape plan? I had trouble identifying the location of those amenities.
Yes, they are. If you look at page 13 of the staff report. They are difficult to see in this zoomed out non-PDF version, but around the trees there is the gazebo and the grill area. We can have those be labeled more clearly. The landscape plan does need to be updated to show the new hammerhead that they provided as well.
Okay.
Be a condition.
I'm assuming they'll have this in this new exhibit I received, coming in, at least I hope so. So your consideration, the amenities issue, in the ordinance has been fulfilled.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to note here for the public and, the application, even though it is not going, through the subdivision process, will be, evaluated and regulated according to the subdivision process because of the complexity of the proposal and the various features. So it will be treated under the same code and regulations as subdivision, but lacking the actual subdivision. That concludes my questions for the staff. Mr. Jones, thank you. And with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Unger to make a presentation, please.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Bob Unger. I am with Unger Enterprises LLC, and we represent Meadowdale Investments. I have a little bit of a laryngitis going on, so I'll try to speak up, but I also want to be able to preserve my voice for comments later on. As staff has already commented, it is 39-unit townhomes. Our zoning is, the existing zoning is R3, which does allow for the high-density projects such as we are proposing. And as staff has commented, it has been reviewed by the city staff, and we've received positive comments and with the standard conditions of approval that you would expect. You were discussing the landscape plan based upon the amenities, and we'll have to have our landscape architects update the landscape plan because really you couldn't see the amenities. We exceed the open space requirements. In our amenities, we have the pathway, the gazebo, playground, picnic tables, barbecues, and all of those fall within the requirements for the PUD. The buildings are essentially the same throughout, but we will make architectural deviations where we'll put in stone siding, different varieties of siding and stone, and also using paint colors. We'll also make some deviations from building to building. We have reviewed the staff report and their conclusions and the conditions of approval, and we really have no issues. And if I could, sir, I would like to reserve any additional time for my rebuttal so that I can save my voice, and I'll stand for any questions you might have right now.
Mr. Unger, this is submitted as an exhibit. Did you have a PowerPoint along with this, or do we have that loaded?
I have not seen that.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, that's for one of the citizens who I believe will be speaking in opposition.
I misunderstood that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Unger. In respect to your voice, we will hear from you in the rebuttal, and thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Sure. With that, we'll go to those signed up. In the neutral column, we have, is it Billis Trostel? I'm sorry if I slaughtered his. Okay. And thank you very much. Next is Steve Cole. Mr. Cole? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving to those in opposition, we have Kathleen Vogt. Do you wish to testify, please?
Thank you.
You pull the mic. Thank you.
My name's Kathleen Vogt. I live at 224 East Plymouth Street, Caldwell, Idaho. When I moved to Caldwell in 1978, the population was right around 16,000. Today, it's 62,748 in Caldwell. Canyon County rose from 83,756 in 1980 to 243,115 in 2022. Seems like the developers are taking every square inch of ground in this county to put homes. And like in this situation, putting 39 homes in there in one small area instead of 2 or 3 nice homes. I wouldn't object to the 2 or 3 nice homes going in. Also, we've got such a traffic issue already on North Illinois because you've got Plymouth Street, North 3rd, and North Illinois all intersecting at one point and trying to get out onto North Illinois. There's Plymouth and Illinois are designated truck routes by the state. So we have, on average, anywhere from 8 to 15 sage driver trucking, or trucks coming down. And they creep, and they back up traffic. And they creep down to Madison and then go back that way. I talked to the people at Sage Trucking, and they said they can't reverse the route because they need that sharp corner coming off of Plymouth onto Illinois. So there's traffic issues there. If the freeway is shut down for any reason, a traffic accident or anything, they send them down Plymouth and then on to Illinois, which can be 3 or 4 hours of just constant traffic. So if that's going to be the situation, they need to put traffic lights up or something to help control that. With these 39 units, there's going to be added children for the schools. They figure 1.5 children per unit. It's going to be another 58 and a half kids. I don't know where the half one's coming from, but our classrooms are already overcrowded. There's a teacher shortage. So that's another consideration to take into place. Another concern I have is that eventually these homes will be sublet or something and turned into rentals. And rentals, for the most part, they don't take pride in their places. They don't keep them up. And they're proposing a Dollar General store right across the street. So there's going to be more traffic. And it's just not going to be safe for the kids. It's not going to be safe for us trying to get out onto Illinois. And then the irrigation said they're going to have a pressurized system. Golden Gate Irrigation District is the oldest one in Caldwell, and they have not maintained it through the years. There's cracks and breaks everywhere. We get very little water. We had it 3 times this year, and that was all. So we've got dead grass all over that area. And if they put a pressurized system in, that's going to help them, but it's not going to help us down the line. It's just going to take more of our water pressure and our water away from us. So those are my concerns. And I thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Next, we have signed up, Sharon Hanson did not speak, and Mr. Mike Spangola. Would you like to testify, please?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. My name is Mike Spagnola, S is in Sam, P is in Paul, A-G, N-O-L-A, Spagnola.
Thank you very much.
I live at 1716 Polk. My house is on the rim just above the proposed development. I've been there 40 years. My concerns, let me get my CNI glasses on here. The lady just mentioned the subletting and rental units. Again, what's the motivation for a renter, short-term renter, 1 year, 2 years to maintain the building? Site maintenance as far as yards, snow removal, keeping the area clean. The roads are 26 foot, which is the minimum. If all of these places, if they have a party or somebody parks out on the street, that's gonna limit the EMS access. So 26 foot is the minimum. Again, if you have cars parked on any street, that'll limit the EMS access. So they said there was a fire plug nearby. What's the fire department's requirement for fire plugs to be close to this size of a development? And is there enough water pressure to have this happen? That also there's two canals there. There's one up above and one down below, and that one down below floods out. And my kids used to ice skate down there in the winter. So does Mr. Unger and his associates plan on putting any kind of safety fences up around those canals to keep children from falling into them? Will there be stop signs or any kind of traffic control devices coming out of that unit? And that pretty much brings me to my main concern. That's over 100 cars in that unit, in this development. So can you imagine at 6 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, all those cars trying to get on to North Illinois to go to work. At that time, there's children on that sidewalk going up to Sacagawea. During the summer, they're on that sidewalk back and forth, going to the park, going to the Maverick. As a retired police officer, I've been up close and personal in the aftermath of drivers not in a hurry to get someplace, not paying attention to their surroundings. And I'm telling you, sir, that's something I never want to see again. I don't think any of us here wants to ever see that. The first child that's struck by a car, the guy that's late getting to work or coming out of there, it'll be more than a black mark. It's a disaster waiting to happen. It's a recipe for disaster. So, and again, the lady mentioned the dollar store across the road. More traffic. That's a 2-lane road with a center turn lane at North Illinois. I patrolled these streets of Caldwell here for a couple of decades. Unless you mentioned the population, you can't put a plug in that. Population is gonna pop. But 4.5 acres, all these units crammed into this little area with the noise, with the traffic, with the danger to the children going back and forth to school. And right down the block is the trailer park, and there's a bus stops in there. So I don't know, I don't think it's a very well planned out deal. It seems to me like it's a money grab. Whoever's involved with this is trying to make money off of this little patch of ground. And I think at the sacrificing the safety of the children that are on that sidewalk, sacrificing the area to potential crime, potential noise ordinance. I'm not sure how, all the other stuff that's going on, but to me, it's a boondoggle. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm worried about the children on that on the sidewalk that we paid to have sidewalks put in. But, I think it's a dangerous situation, and it will happen. Again, I've been up close and personal with the aftermath of these types of incidents, and it's something I never want to see again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next side up is, Mr. Dave Witt. Care to testify, please? I have your presentation here.
Thank
Marked
you.
Exhibit PUD 22-6-1.
Yeah, my name is actually Dan Goodman, but I'm representing Dave Witt as his attorney.
Okay.
And
Did you sign up, Mr. Goodman?
I did.
Okay.
So if you want to just strike my name from the later one, so I'm not up here twice, that'd be great.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm an attorney representing Dave Witt. I work at White Peterson, 5700 East Franklin Road in Nampa. Dave Witt is an affected neighbor to this development. He lives at 1000 North Illinois Road. That's located up in this picture, up at the top right corner there. Now, Dave Witt, he currently lives in a single-family home, and this PUD, as it stands, is going to be built and abutting right up next to his property, as you can see in the top right corner there. Now, we're specifically asking for the city to impose 2 additional conditions for approval. The first being the installation of a fence and landscape buffer zone between the north perimeter of Dave Witt's property and the street turnaround, which was discussed earlier, again, up at that top right corner there, which is designated for the southeast corner of the development. So we'd like to see installation of both a fence and landscape buffer zone. And that fence, we'd also like to see extending to any part of the perimeter that is shared between Dave Witt's property and this PUD. The other condition for approval that we'd like to see imposed here is the reduction in height of the buildings proposed for lots 13, 15, and 16. Those are the 3 lots that, again, are going to be adjacent to Dave Witt's property. We'd like to see those reduced to a maximum height of 25 feet. Currently, they're supposed to be, along with the rest of the buildings in this PUD, 3 stories tall, which on average with a pitched roof is 38 feet or more. Now, first, I'd like to just briefly discuss the fence and buffer that I've requested and exactly why I'm requesting that, and then I'll quickly touch on this building height issue. Now, when it comes to the fence and buffer, the Caldwell City Code requires that a street landscape buffer of 10 feet or more be put in place between local residential or non-classified streets, which Quarry Lane will be in this case, and any adjacent property. So we'd like to see a 10-foot buffer in compliance with that code section. Additionally, as I'd mentioned, I'd also like to see a fence. Now, to Bob Unger's credit, he told me over the phone that he does intend to put a 6-foot tall wooden fence around the PUD. So, it's unclear from his preliminary plat plan exactly where that fence is going to go, but my understanding, and I think Bob's understanding too, is that that fence, at least for now, is planned to go entirely around the PUD, which is at least going to cover a portion of that perimeter that's shared between Dave Witt's property and the PUD. However, it's unclear right now whether that fence, whether Unger plans to build that fence along this turnaround at the northeast corner of that picture there. Now, we'd like to see that fence installed and extended through that area too, so that Dave Witt's property is separated by not only this landscape buffer, but also a fence and that turnaround zone. Again, this would be in compliance with the Caldwell City Code as it stands today. Now, I'm just going to move on to this height reduction that we're requesting. Again, this is specifically and only for lots 13, 15, and 16. And why these lots? Because they are the lots that are directly abutting Dave Witt's property. Now, where they're located currently, um, is gonna produce a number of problems. First of all, the code requires that, that developments next to, single-family homes should not exceed a maximum of 25 feet. Now, I know that that generally does not apply to PUDs, but part of the PUD ordinance requires that the city follow, Caldwell's comprehensive plan. And now, in the comprehensive plan, the city is required to keep in mind not only, areas zoned as environmentally sensitive, which I'll point out, this entire, border here that's going to be the entire border where the PUD is abutting this canal zone, that whole area is right now designated, under the comprehensive plan map as being environmentally sensitive. So these three lots, number 13, 15, and 16, are all going to have shadows, year-round shadows in the evening that cast across this entire environmentally sensitive area, as well as during the wintertime, shadows cast to the north over this same area. Now, the comprehensive plan also requires that the city and the PUD ordinance that I'd mentioned requires in following the comprehensive plan that these areas be protected and that mitigating efforts be taken to make sure that sensitive areas, environmentally sensitive areas like this one, are not negatively affected. The PUD plan as it stands today will absolutely negatively affect this environmentally sensitive area. In combination with that, it flies in the face of the policy considerations imposed under the comprehensive plan, specifically to maintain open spaces and have those spaces be enjoyed by local neighbors. So when we consider the comprehensive plan's policy requirements, the comprehensive plan's concerns with regard to environmentally sensitive areas like this one, and the Caldwell Code's general requirements as to new developments next to single-family homes like Bob Witt's, having only a height of 25 feet maximum, I think that this second condition for approval that I'm asking for, the lowering of these building heights to a maximum of 25 feet, is perfectly reasonable. So in sum, we'd just like to see these two conditions for approval added, the landscape buffer zone with a fence, as well as a reduction in lots 13, 15, and 16 to a height of 25 feet. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a question. I can't read the lot numbers, the ones that you mentioned, 13, 15, and 16.
Sure.
Could you just show me, somehow describe where they are? So
13 is all the way to the right, all the way to the top.
okay, I see it now.
Yep, and then 15 and 16 are to the left of this road running in this direction. See those right there.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Next, we have Nancy Curry. Testify, please.
My name is Nancy Curry. I live at 918 North Illinois Avenue. In 1982, we chose to purchase our home in a quiet area of mostly seniors and have owned our home on North Illinois for over 40 years. I'd like to address a couple traffic issues. It is already dangerous for residents exiting their driveways onto North Illinois. Since the Maverick gas station expanded into a truck stop, our street has constant heavy traffic and has now become a truck route. In addition, we have extensive traffic to and from Sacagawea School. Plus, the proposed Dollar General store at North Illinois and Madison could add an untold number of additional vehicles to the already heavy traffic. The P&Z preliminary plat, page 45, states, traffic impact study must be completed prior to submittal. This was not checked as completed. Why was the required traffic study not done? This proposed complex could potentially add an additional 140 plus vehicles to North Illinois. You've got 39 proposed units with 3 parking spaces per unit, plus additional 23 overflow spaces. That equals 140 vehicles in that one location. That's 140 plus vehicles added to the already very heavy traffic on the street. And 140 vehicles adds significant increase in traffic noise to those levels to the people that live there now. Some other issues are are these classified as low-income housing, Section 8, rentals, or owned? If owned, will the HOA allow rentals of townhouses by owners? Crime statistically increases with multifamily developments where there are a large number of people in a small property area. Also, another problem that we have in Caldwell, of course, are the fireworks. So you've got potential fireworks cause grass fires catching along and up the hillside, spreading throughout the entire neighborhood. This infill planned unit development does not contribute a compatible design to the existing, mostly one-story, single-family homes in the neighborhood. For instance, it goes by building type. Well, it's a multifamily, and we're all single-family homes. Height, 3 stories, single-family, one-story homes. Bulk, huge buildings, and even the site location. They are requesting a 0 interior lot line setback to meet density standards. We want our neighborhood to remain single-family homes only. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next we have Mr. Gerald Curry, please.
My name is Gerald Curry, and I live at 918 North Illinois Avenue. Some of these things are going to seem redundant, but I think it's important to bring them back up again. The first notation I made here, since we sat down and things you discussed with the staff over here, was there was a question asked by you whether, what was the ownership of this property? And I don't think that's been addressed yet. Our many decades old services infrastructures are going to be severely stressed if the proposed development of this property is approved. The city's sewer capacity will be affected with this complex in the Nogales First Avenue development. The city water volume and pressure will be greatly reduced. The city power grid will be strained, especially in the summer months. The storm drains will be hard-pressed to handle the additional runoff from the proposed complex's streets, added to the already high-volume runoff coming down the hill from the Canyon Hill streets. We have already had several instances of flooding on lower elevation properties from heavy rain runoff. In addition, there will be possible flooding to these established properties from unattended irrigation water. Who does the watering, the owners or the HOA? Golden Gate is the irrigation canal in the city of Caldwell that I have on-demand irrigation water rights from at my address. We use a pump that requires sufficient volume and head pressure to operate properly. Because this development, the Nogales and First Avenue development, and proposed Dollar General store would or potentially use pressurized irrigation water, I believe there will be insufficient water available at my property, which is a 900 block, for me to water, not to mention the properties farther down the canal who are already having issues getting sufficient water since they're near the end of the entire run. We already have this problem when Luby Park diverts the water for their purposes. Due to a major canal repair, we had a short watering season this year, and it took all summer for my lawn to recover from the water shortage. With this complex installed, the canal modifications outside of the watering season, so our, watering season is for this coming summer or the following summer, depending when this is constructed, not be affected like we were this past year and going for weeks without any water because they're attaching into the canal services. And thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Curry. I believe that is all who have signed up. I'd like to take this opportunity to address some of those issues with the staff and then allow for rebuttal that might be informative for the applicant as well. The notes I have here, Mr. McDonald, about the traffic impact study, could you comment on the requirements for that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. A traffic impact study is required in the city of Caldwell if a development exceeds a specific threshold of trip generation per day. This development is very far below what the threshold is for a traffic impact study. In this case, as we looked at the number of units here, it was not, code does not require a traffic impact study, and nor is this development anywhere close to that threshold.
Thank you. But what is your estimation of the peak average daily trips, either afternoon or morning?
So for 39 units in a development such as this, your average daily trip is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of probably just over 200 vehicles, and then your peak is going to be maybe 10% of that.
Okay, so.
So that's, I'm just estimating. I don't have the trip generation manual in front of me. The threshold for a traffic impact study is 1,000 vehicle trips per day, which you can see this is far below that.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Moving on to the flooding issue, I have a concern about the topography obviously is going to shed a lot of water in this direction. How has the application addressed the flooding, and is that adequate to take care of any potential flooding and or icing over at the bottom of the hill?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, I cannot speak to flooding that originates from up on top of the hill. What I can tell you is that every development within the city of Caldwell is required to adhere to the stormwater manual that the city has in place, which means they are responsible to retain on site their full stormwater event for either the 25-year event or the 100-year event, depending on how their system is set up. And so there shouldn't be any water leaving their site specifically out into the public right away unless it was an excessive storm over one of those 100-year events. They are required to retain their own stormwater and control all the stormwater on their site. If there is water originating from up the hill and passing through their site out to the road, that would be considered a historic discharge, and so they could deal with that accordingly, but they cannot add any water flow or any stormwater runoff to that historic discharge.
Thank you very much. Back to the traffic, we have a question, at least I have a question about the school bus stops. Do you know how that would be accommodated?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, I do not. I have not had any direct discussion with the school district, and so I am not sure how that would be accommodated. That may be something that the applicant has a better understanding of.
And Mr. McDonald, would you consider an internal bus stop to be doable for this neighborhood? Is that how PUDs of this nature are treated, or is it of your experience, you've seen them mainly just on the road?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, for the configuration of this development, I would not recommend an internal bus stop. I don't think, any of the school districts, or the Caldwell School District in this case, would want to drive a bus into this development and have to turn around and drive back out. In my mind, the logical location for, pickup would be on North Illinois, or a pullout on North Illinois where a bus could, pick up students.
And, Mr. McDonald, would that pullout, perhaps be the hammerhead at the north end of that road, the proposed road?
Again, Mr. Hearing Examiner, I'm not a busing expert. I would defer that to the school district on where they would like their buses to navigate and how they would like to operate, this area specifically.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Yeah, I don't know if this question, brought up by one of the, people testified about the environmentally sensitive nature of presumably the hillside. Is that something that, Public Works looks at?
That's a very good question. I was looking at the zoning map, the comp plan map that showed that, and it appears to me, it's actually a zoning classification, and so I think that is actually originates in the planning and zoning department. But what it appears is that it encompasses the canal that's up on the hill, and that's really the primary reason that environmental, zoning, designation is there, is for that canal that runs along the top of the hill.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Jones, the same question. How does the, planning department, administer, those environmentally sensitive areas, or what is being proposed here to ameliorate, impacts on that?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, for that zoning, it would be for any building that's trying to be done at that parcel. Since this is outside of that and the building is not going into the environmentally sensitive area, we wouldn't be able, trying to find the right word. This development shouldn't be affecting that environmentally sensitive zone since it's not being built inside that zone. That is for the canal up on the hill, so it's a higher elevation. Since their development does not go into the environmentally sensitive zone, there should not be a problem.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Now clarify for me, is the property boundary that, heavy line, look at the exhibit on, that heavy line, with the footage and bearings and angles, that's the property line, right? So the designation on the comprehensive plan is wholly outside of the property boundary?
Correct. You want to pull that up, Rob?
Okay.
If you would like to look at the slide on the TV right now, that would show you
Okay.
separate.
So it does follow the property boundary. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on. Well, there's a question, this is just out of the blue, but this has happened in my own neighborhood and almost took out my property, but gophers were busy on the bank of the canal and opened a breach, and it sent a wall of water through my neighborhood. Is this something that we can plan for, engineer for, or just hope that the gophers stay away, or is that an issue, or is this an issue for the canal company?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, that's a very good question. I think theoretically it could be planned for in the development if you wanted to build a retaining wall. There is always the chance when you have a canal that's perched up on a hill that there could be some sort of an issue or a rupture, and that has happened at other locations a little further downstream on this very same canal. The question comes into the maintenance of the canal, which is not a city responsibility. It is I believe it's the notice. It's the irrigation district's responsibility to maintain the canal. And, I don't know how much risk there is. It may be very minimal, but there is always that possibility that something could happen. I don't know how you plan for that appropriately. And I don't know how you anticipate, how much water may come down or at what location.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. While you have the mic, I have another question on that as far as going back to the hammerhead on the north end of the project. It just seems logical to me to have that as another point of ingress egress. Is there something in the way you administer ingress egress to the highways that would preclude that from being an entryway? Or I know you said you don't think it's particularly needed, but for example, in the case about the school bus, if they wanted to get in there and out of there, is there a utility in having that as a through street?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, the reason that has not been opened up as another access point is because of the conflict that it has with the Third Avenue and Plymouth Street access points on the other side of the road.
Okay.
It doesn't have the proper separation, and so it's not an ideal location for an ingress-egress location.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Jones, there's a good point brought up by Mr. Goodman, testified about the height, maximum height for those lots in the southwest corner. Could you tell us the height maximum in the particular zone and what the applicant has proposed as a maximum height for all the structures?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, to my best memory, in the R3, the maximum building height is 45 foot. The exact height of these buildings, I don't know off the top of my head. That might be a question for the applicant. There is a section of code that does say that building next to single-family residential that is 25 foot, you shall not exceed 25 foot. Of course, with the PUD, you can ask to waive this requirement. So they have the ability to ask to keep these buildings at the height that they have them now, but that is also something that could be changed, I believe, through a condition.
And are these, Ms. Jones, 3-story structures we're talking about? I'm not really clear on that.
I believe they might be, but we can, applicant can specify that more during the rebuttal.
Thank you. And one of the points brought up is fire response time. What is the approximate distance from the nearest fire station? And is that within the prescribed distance according to comprehensive plan and zoning code?
From our quick measurement, we're looking at about 1.5 miles from the nearest fire department. Comes to actual response time, I am not able to answer that question. That'd be more of the fire department's.
Mr. Jones, what is the prescribed response time and or distance? And does this meet that criteria?
So the only thing our department can say is that it's about a mile and a half away from the fire department. The fire department did not leave any comments on this application. They were asked for comments, but provided none. So that's all we can say at this time.
Okay, so we assume that because the fire department lodged no objection, that it's within their criteria for response time and or distance.
Correct.
Thank you. Maybe this, Ms. Jones, is for the applicant, but have they proposed a homeowners association to do the maintenance, the typical exterior maintenance that we see in these types of applications?
I believe so. If I remember correctly, HOAs are a requirement. I know in condition 10.5, the developer / HOA shall be responsible for maintenance and landscaping. So
Appreciate that. Thank you.
the developer will be required to maintain this property.
Okay, then I think the last question here, issue brought up about fencing and landscaping around the perimeter. Do you know the status of that in the application?
For the fencing, that would be more for the decision of the applicant. As by code, they are not required to do the fencing unless it's to be site obstructing, which this does not count as a site, necessary site obstructing use. For the landscape buffer they were talking about for that hammerhead up on the top right portion of this image, those landscape buffers are, the landscape buffer is not a requirement for internal roads of subdivisions. It's for the more of the frontage roads, so like North Illinois Avenue.
Okay, thank you. I think that concludes my questions on this. I'd like to offer Mr. Unger a chance for rebuttal, please.
Mr. Eggleston, Bob Unger, the applicant again. Let me run down through your questions that you just went through with staff. Obviously, we've discussed the traffic impact study as not being required. And as far as any kind of flooding or runoff that may come off of the canal bank, one of the things that we're proposing is on the canal bank, we want to put in pasture grass or fescue, which will help keep the soils and everything stable, but it will also absorb any kind of runoff that may be coming off there. And as staff said, we are required to retain all of our storm drain and everything on site, and that everything will be engineered and reviewed by the city engineering staff. Bus stop, you came up with the same idea that I came up with, was possibly we'd like to work with the school and maybe put in a bus stop where the EMS access is. I think that's an excellent place for it. And I think we would be able to do that if the school district would agree with us. So we will pursue that. Once on the environmental issue, our property doesn't go all the way up the hillside, about a half to maybe 2/3 in a couple of points. The structures that we are proposing are not going to create shadows and things like that that are going to adversely affect the environmental area there. In fact, the planting of the fescue and the pasture grass may just enhance some of the wildlife area up there. Um, so, I think we're trying to be somewhat sensitive to that. Um, we have no intentions of encroaching into the canal bank or anything to that effect. So, that's why we've designed this project the way we have, so that we're not encroaching into the banks. Um, as far as the height condition, we are looking at a 38-foot height to the peak of these structures. The first floor is a tandem garage, so that'll park 2 vehicles. The second floor is a basic living area, and the third floor are the bedrooms. Um, One of and I understand Mr. Will's issue of his property and our corner up there where the turnaround and everything is. But if you look at these buildings, first of all, his home sits approximately, and I don't have an exact measurement, but I can say approximately 8 feet higher than our structures will be as far as ground level. And the setbacks, first of all, the setback from the road is 20 feet. The road is 26 feet, plus sidewalks. So really, we're at somewhere in the area of to the property line or to the edge of his property. Our structures are approximately 60 feet from his property line because of the road and everything that exists in the sidewalks. And of course, then he has a setback on top of that, which would be, should be somewhere in the area of 15 feet. So we're a substantial distance from his residence. And also the fact that his residence does sit higher than our level. I think that the 38 feet that we're expecting and anticipating is actually going to be, for him, is going to be in that 25-foot area that he's requesting, without our having to remove the garage floors of those structures. And of course, if we had to reduce the heights, then we would be in a position where we'd have to put in more outdoor parking to accommodate those 3 units that he's asking us to reduce the height on.
Mr. Unger, let me ask you at this point, if taking down the grading, essentially making a subterranean for the parking, is that feasible? It seems like on the hillside there, it might be even desirable to level that site out.
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we will be doing some grading in that area. And actually, we'll probably be going down somewhere in the area of 5 feet in that particular area to level everything else out because of our roads and everything, so that we have correct drainage on our roads. So that area will be reduced in elevation where those structures will be, even further than they are right now. So that would be, at least another 5 feet, lowering the entire structure.
So on the uphill side of say the uppermost lot, 15, is it that the grade differential between the hillside and the roof would be less than 36 feet?
Yes, sir.
By a considerable amount?
We're probably going to be in the area of 25 feet in comparison to his ground level.
And what issues would you face as a builder in digging that down a little bit, lowering the overall structure? Is that an insurmountable issue on a hillside like that?
Well, we truly are not on what's considered a hillside. Those structures are not considered as being on the hillside. We've tried to keep all of our structures out of the canal hillside. So really, there would be no issues in, reducing the elevations in that area. Like I said, we do need to, take off some of the, base there in order to get a more level area, and to accommodate the roads and drainage.
Okay, so have you done the engineering on that new, hammerhead? And, is that going to lower the overall terrain for the hammerhead as well?
Yes, it will.
Okay, yeah, I want you, think about that. You mentioned the sage, and looking at some of the photographs, of the property, that seems to be the native plants, right? The question is going towards, essentially, maintaining that hillside as something other than, dirt and weeds. And, is it, possible to address those kinds of issues, with, xeriscape type native landscaping, along particularly the heavily contoured area in the center, the north-south center there, to enhance that other than with the fescue and the pasture grass? Is there a possibility of adding more native landscaping like the sage?
Yes, sir. We could go with sage, something more native than the fescue and the pasture grass. Those areas will also be irrigated, sprinkled so that we have, continuous growth there, because we don't want it to dry out and die either. It is, to some extent, you could almost say it would be somewhat of an attraction in that you would have a nice green hillside instead of a brown hillside. But certainly we could have our landscape architect look at that and come up with some more native type ground cover than the fescue.
And would you
Do that.
address the flooding issue? There is potential, I guess, not the failure of a canal, but just the natural flow across the property. Do you see that as a difficult thing to achieve, to contain the floodwaters on the site? Or sheet flow, let's say.
Right, sheet flow is that was our concern more than anything else, because it was something that was brought up at the neighborhood meeting, that there was some sheet flow that occasionally happened there on the canal bank. So certainly we will look at that and see if we can provide a more natural plantings to go along with the landscaping.
Thank you, Mr. Unger. Now, a couple more questions on to the fencing, and what kind of fencing had you anticipated? What do you proposed?
We're proposing to do perimeter fencing. It would be a solid vinyl fencing, privacy type fence, around the entire perimeter of the project, which would include the property there, Mr. Witt's property.
Now, Mr. Unger, the fence would cut right across that slope. If you follow the property line, it seems sort of counterproductive, and for a number of reasons. With looking at the native landscape, if you would, native species and so forth. Does that make much sense to fence up that hillside, in the center of the property there, where it approaches the canal? Or would you think a design that followed the contours of the development rather than the property boundary? You see where I'm getting at? To basically get it off the hillside, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yes, sir. That's a very valid point, and typically, most cities require that you do the perimeter fencing. In this particular situation, we could bring that perimeter fencing down to the toe, let's say, of the bank. Um, and we'd have no issues with that, and uh, but we would go ahead and fence that turnaround in the corner there, next to Mr. Witt's, so that he, has that privacy there.
And, on the very northern tip, um, I guess the same question where it just sort of extends into a point that, I don't know about that. I'm not familiar with the property, but, the question is, could that fencing be more respective of the terrain rather than the property boundary?
Yes, sir. We certainly can do that, and we'll make sure that we get that straightened out and that it becomes more obvious where the fencing will be.
Thank you, Mr. Unger. We did address, in one of the conditions of approval addresses the HOA for maintenance. What is your HOA plan? What would that address? What would there be responsibilities be?
We are going to have CCNRs, which will also include the HOA. HOA's maintenance will be for all of the streets, all of the landscaping, not just the common landscaping, but the landscaping next to the structures. So it will be the HOA's responsibility to maintain all of that, including the storm drain facilities.
Thank you very much. I think that covers the questions. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Unger?
I think I think we pretty well covered all of that. Some of the comments, traffic is always an issue in any kind of development. I think staff kind of covered that very well. The property is under one ownership, so we got that clarified. And I think Mr. Goodman's comments, they're good comments. I think we think the project complies with all the aspects of the PUD as reviewed by staff. And although, we can get into the comp plan, but the comp plans are a planning tool for future development and growth of the city. And sometimes they get mixed in with the existing land use process. But and it even in the comp plan, it even states, that comprehensive plan sets forth the policy framework of the city of Caldwell for its future growth. It should be the intent of the Planning and Zoning Department, Planning and Zoning Commission, Hearings Examiner, and the City Council to use the plans as a guide in carrying out responsibilities under the state law and city ordinance. This property was annexed and zoned R3 for high-density development, and that was all done under the review of the comprehensive plan, because the comprehensive plan, that's what it spelled out it wanted to happen in this area. And that's exactly what we're asking for, is what it was approved for. And I think we're able to handle the fencing issue for Mr. Witt. And I believe if everybody looks at the setbacks from our structures, proposed structures, to his house, and the difference in elevations, I I don't believe that our buildings are going to obstruct his view to any great extent. And I think we can even comply, um, with the, comments that were brought up. So I think that's really, I think I've covered everything I could possibly cover. Um, we think it's a viable project. We think it's a good project. These are individual lots, individual units that will be owned by, separate owners. And if they end up renting that out, we have no control of that, like that, over that, as if any other house in any other subdivision, and there's a lot of that going on throughout the valley. Um, so having said that, ask for your recommendation of approval, and, if you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Unger. See, I do have a question for the staff, but I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Jones, about the ownership of the properties, the individual ownership, the city code does not restrict the use of that. In other words, if somebody wants to rent a property, that's their right as property ownership. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Okay, we can't really regulate that, and it would also be, if we did, it'd be a regulating nightmare, almost impossible to achieve. Let's see. I know I'm missing something here. Now, as far as there's a good point made as far as the safety of children moving in and out of this subdivision. Gets back to the bus stop issue, and Mr. Unger addressed that. Would you consider that a partial solution of essentially protecting the safety of school children to have a bus stop further on up the road from the ingress egress point?
Staff believes it'd be a better conversation between the applicant and the school district. I believe our staff believes the school district would know the best location for their bus stop. And with looking at this plan, that's something that the applicant and the school district can work on.
Okay, and then one more question, well, actually two from Mr. McDonald on the Golden Gate Irrigation District. That is not regulated by the city, but are there stipulations, say through your comments that address the irrigation issue, and do you see that as a problem on this site?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, it is, you are correct, it is not regulated by the city. It is its own irrigation district, and they have their own policies and everything else. This development is required to comply with the city irrigation requirements as part of development, which means they need to build a system that complies with all the city requirements. It is the developer's responsibility to coordinate with the irrigation district and confirm that there is irrigation water and that a facility can be constructed to meet city requirements. And that is primarily because it's not city staff's responsibility to make that connection. It is the developer's responsibility to do that and implement that in their design. We will not approve the design plans until we know for sure that that coordination has been made and their irrigation system complies with city standards.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Then just a clarification, the question was also brought up about the city water, potable water Is there, is the city going to have a problem supplying potable water to this development?
No, there should be no issue with this development. I work very closely with the water department and am familiar with the water system throughout the city. And there has been no indication to me whatsoever that there's any pressure issues at this location here. And especially, for a development of this size, it really doesn't put a huge burden on the system. We are in the process now, the city, of constructing additional municipal wells, and so we're always monitoring the water consumption throughout the city to make sure that we are growing and increasing the system to be able to accommodate those demands.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. And do you have any further comments, either Mr. McDonald or Mr. Jones? Thank you very much. With that, I'll close the hearing, the testimony part of that, and move to the analysis. Well, sir, you had the opportunity, but no,
Mr. Hearing Examiner,
Yeah.
at this point, we can't allow anybody to come up and testify because then we have to go back and allow the applicant to rebut. And so I don't think at this point that we're allowed to permit anyone else to come up and re-testify.
Mr. Spagnoli, I agree with the staff that the hearing is closed. And, well, I'm sorry, we're going to move on. I think we addressed the issues that were brought up. So thank you very much. And the analysis portion of this will go as follows. The staff has provided the comprehensive plan analysis. It's found in pages 8 through 9 in the staff report. I find that these goals and policies delineated and described are appropriate to the application and cover the comprehensive planning aspects of that. Also, the codes and laws governing PUD and the subdivision proposed for Monument Valley townhomes were correctly addressed and appropriate as found in the staff report. The findings of facts, section 6, for the PUD and preliminary plat. The Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The section 7 conclusions of law for the PUD and the preliminary plat. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case and recommend to the Caldwell City Council that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, the hearing was legally noticed and posted, and the hearing was held and conducted under the requirements of Idaho Code and city ordinances. Section 8, the recommendation for the PUD and preliminary plat. Based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby recommends to the mayor and city council that case number PUD 22-000006 and sub 22-000034, request for a plan unit development preliminary plat for Monument Valley townhomes with 39 residential townhome lots with 9 fourplex buildings and 1 triplex building on approximately 4.55 acres, parcels R34916, R34917, R34918, with designation of R3. High density residential is approved with the conditions of approval listed in section 10 to be enumerated in a development agreement. And the staff report has conditions in section 10, 10.1 through 10.9, to which I shall add several of the conditions. First of all, amendment to condition of approval, 10.2, looking for a date on Exhibit A3, the date that exhibit was submitted, which I believe is 7/25/2022. In item 10.3, the file exhibit PA1 submitted by the city engineer is dated October 13th, 2022. Just add the date. In item 10.4, there's a reference, let me verify this, to Exhibit A8, and I believe the reference number is A13. Let me verify that. Yeah, change it, in 10.4, change A8 to A13, and add a date of submission. I don't have the date. And in the last sentence, refer to A13 instead of A8, strike A8. Add conditions 10.10. The maximum number of dwelling units shall be 39. Add condition 10.11. And this I mentioned in the testimony, but ask you to cite the engineering criteria found in their exhibit, the engineering memorandum, in an asterisk note, and you can quote this from page 18 of the staff report, and the paragraph begins, due to the nature, complexity, and many civil improvements required in multifamily land development projects, et cetera. I want to add that as a condition of approval. Item 10.12, there will be an updated landscape plan from the one that is on the record, and that landscape plan shall include enhanced hillside landscaping to include native plants to both improve the look of the hillside and the erosion stability. The staff will have authority to approve those landscape plans as being complete before they go to the city council. Item 10.13, recommend a school bus stop on the northern portion of the site to be coordinated between the staff and the school district to find an appropriate site, if indeed there is an appropriate site. And item 10.14, the perimeter fencing shall follow the contours of the hillside and stay closer to the developed portions of the property, and that there shall be access from that fencing to the hillside for the property ownership as a pathway amenity. And finally, condition 1015, the proposed parcels, 13, 15, and 16, shall be engineered to have a lower elevation along with the hammerhead in that southeast corner. Lower the elevation there to reduce the overall apparent height to the properties above. The details of that will be approved by staff. And with that, I complete the conditions of approval and the hearing on this particular case. And thank you very much for your participation. At this time, I'd like to ask, who in the audience has testimony for the transitional house? And that's just about everybody in the audience. We have I'd like to yeah, I wanted to move this one up. Oh, you want to move this? Okay. So what I'd like to do is switch the cases coming up so that you folks can provide your testimony. See, I lost my, oh, here it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch cases SUP 2208 with SUP 2223 and hear the Val Harris of Xerox Inc. Next. That there are a lot of people here to give testimony for that, and I'd like to try to accommodate their schedules. And so with that, Mr. Jones, if you would make the presentation for SUP 22-23, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. Today we have a request for an approval of a special use permit to allow a transitional home for 8 individuals. Just to clarify, this would be for 8 males in the traditional neighborhood zone. And the subject parcel is located at 518 East Denver Street here in Caldwell. For the location, we're looking at a 0.14 acre parcel at 518 East Denver Street. This is west of the North 6th Avenue and East Denver Street intersection. Zoning for this development is in the traditional neighborhood. So a transitional home is allowed with a special use permit approval. For the comp plan, we are also looking at traditional neighborhood, which is a suitable blend of medium and high density residential. This is consistent with the 2040 comp plan. Here is the subject site. In front of this site is a single family home. It's single family homes completely surrounding this whole development. Or I should say parcel, not development. For Proso's site plan, what we're looking at is a four-bedroom home. This will house 8 individuals, male felons is what the applicant has told me. I believe it'll be 2 per bedroom. The applicant can go more in detail about how the living situation will be inside. For the landscaping, the applicant is asking for a deferral to redo the lawn until the spring months come, so the lawn doesn't die. The applicant will be turning the rear yard into parking. They are working with I believe one of the irrigation districts, because there's a culvert in the rear alley, about being able to build over that. Applicant can speak more on that as well. We received no comments from the engineering department, and we also received comments from the Caldwell School District asking for a denial of this SUP. That is on page 13 of the staff report. On November 1st, I did get an email correspondence addressing concerns related to this use and how it would affect the neighborhood. As we see today, we have quite a few people who are here to testify on this use. So I believe the neighborhood will be able to talk about this more than I can. For the findings, we found that transitional home is an allowed use with the approval of special use permit. The proposed design will meet the required parking and landscape requirements once they are completed. Staff finds that the proposed use is compatible with the surrounding land uses of single-family residential, since it is staying a single-family home. There were no objections from other public agencies except from Caldwell School District asking for a denial. I stand for questions.
Did you put that last slide back there? There we go.
And this is my apologies, I should read this one. This is a conclusion of law for the approval of special use permit. So with the approval of special use permit, we need, I'll just read these off. The proposed use would not or will not cause any damage, hazard, nuisance, or other detriment to persons or properties in the vicinity. The proposed use is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan, and the proposed use does not impact the ability of political subdivisions, including school districts, to provide services for the proposed use.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I appreciate your presentation here. It would be desirable to have that in the staff report prior to the hearings, so the public would have the advantage of reviewing that additional information. I do have some questions. The classification of the structure according to the building code is discussed in Exhibit PA1 from Chris Bryant, Thursday, October 6, 2022, an email. And Mr. Bryant states, and this has to do with the building code and how the property be regarded under the building code, and what improvements may or may not have to be done. Mr. Bryant says, this does sound like, from the narrative given in the description, this may be the case, which is the redesignation from R3 to R4, I assume. And he goes on to say it may be able to categorize this under section 310.4 and would then not constitute a change of use. I can actually honestly see this as not being a change of use under 310.4. So the question I have, that statement is rather ambiguous in the terms of, it's not absolute, but using the term may. We need, a definitive answer, as to how the building code would be applied. And, I don't think this is it. We need to say it either is or is not. That, that's not here. What has been your discussion on that issue?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, staff has not had, um, extended conversation with this with the building department. The building department would have to look at their code. It would probably be based on occupancy and what has already been done inside the home to constitute this change of use. This would be, I believe, staff believes that this would be something that they would have to figure out with a inspection of the home, along with the knowledge of this use.
Mr. Jones, does that seem to be, or has that been done? Has the home been inspected, and do we know the status of the potential for required improvements or changes to the interior?
At this time, I do not know. The applicant might be able to answer that. But if they've had conversations between them and the building department with inspections.
But it seems to me this is a fairly critical issue, in as much as, without that understanding, if it does or does not meet the building code, that, is somewhat of a cart before the horse situation, whether we don't know whether, code-wise, which is what we're administering here, would, or this would be possible to even have such a facility if it can't meet the code. I don't know what to do about that, lacking a definitive statement from the housing on that, and it's not even clear which code we're going to follow. So, my point being is, if this cannot meet the code, are we wasting our time here? What's your view on that?
So with talking to staff, we would say that it could be a condition of approval that they would have to meet all building code standards before they could operate.
Well, it's a little more complex than that, in as much as, say they're given approval, but they can't meet the code. Or is it's financially prohibitive to meet the code or whatever. It seems like we have to have a more thorough knowledge of the structure and the ability to serve in this function, in this land use, before such a decision is made. And, this is a speculative project, and, it seems like that part of the homework and application is not really clear to either me or the public. Moving on to the school district, their letters are pretty clear. Their facility is at 516 North 11th Street, which is, like some 6 blocks to the east of that. And I understand that the school district does not typically oppose development one way or the other, but this is the first time I've seen the school district very clearly make that kind of a statement. They propose the use. What sort of weight does the city place on the school district's recommendation?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, as a department, as for the planning, we do honor the opinions of the, public agencies. So the idea of the school district opposing this special use is something that is always kept in consideration. As shown on the slide above, as, you know, number one, the proposed use would not or will not cause any damage, hazard, nuisance or other detriments to persons or properties in the vicinity. There's no way we can say that this use would create any damage, hazard, nuisance, or other detriment. It seems that the school district does have a concern of this with their at-risk students. It would be great if we had a representative from the school here, as I cannot fully speak for the Caldwell School District, but the letter, as they've stated, they oppose this special use permit.
And on the same note, there is, I don't recall the correct title, but there's Academy on Chicago, just a few blocks west of this, and you didn't receive anything from that academy, or it's a private school?
Are you referring to the Canyon Springs High School?
No.
Elevate Academy.
Right, yeah. Anyway, so we have two schools in the vicinity. I imagine the concern might be similar to that. And I'm concerned about the application itself. We have a floor plan, which is good for reference, and a site plan, which just has a narrative to it. It's an aerial photo. This is, I'd have to say the exhibits submitted by the applicant are not up to the kind of standards that we require in order to adjudicate a land use. And looking at page 5 of 16 in the staff report, just a aerial photo from Google that doesn't even put a border around the property in question. Of course, it's more or less centered in the photograph, but I don't think this is acceptable as a site plan. It might be as a vicinity image to give an idea where it sits in the neighborhood, but it lacks any kind of dimensions or proposed striping for the parking. Talking about a gate, ingress, egress on the alley side. The narrative is fine and good, but we have to have plans that are labeled dimensionally and with their purpose and design, and it's not here. Also, the landscaping is such that they're just saying they're going to green the lawn up. When we do a special use permit, we like to bring improvements to the neighborhood, and it doesn't seem like we're getting close to that. Is this all you received, Mr. Jones, from the applicant as far as plans and elevations and so forth?
Yes, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Okay, yeah. It really, begs for more information just to be able to evaluate that. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for your testimony with that. I'd like the applicant, is it Val Harris, make a presentation, please.
How you doing? I'm Val Harris. Now, the questions you had there, will be in the rebuttal. I'll just make my statement right now, is that right?
However you choose to spend your 10 minutes, yeah, you can.
All righty.
But you'll also have an opportunity for rebuttal at the end of the hearing.
I just didn't know if I should answer some of your questions now, because you'd had questions about how my app was done. I did present that to two people at the planning and zoning that both said this is sufficient. And I know it was hand-drawn, but Steve Volz and to the present associate planner that's here had both said that it was sufficient. And so that's why I didn't take it any further than that. I did file the application to extend because we're coming into winter months. It doesn't do any good to replant that front end, reseed it, and water it because like today we have snow. So that's why that request was sent in with it to allow us to do that after the fact. We are waiting on the irrigation district. They have to design where they're gonna put that culvert in the back so that we can put in a gate back there. That back property then will be leveled and put in chip base. I'm very aware of water retention. I dealt with several cities in Washington, including Seattle, Olympia, Vancouver, Washington, concerning water retention, and I realize that it's my responsibility to keep it on the property, and the best way to do that is put down that chip base. So that's, hope to answer some of those questions about what you had there. The fellow that came out to do the inspection, we talked about it. The biggest thing, the issue was downstairs that it have egress windows, which it does. That house has been remodeled. I don't know what year it was, but it has the egress windows in there, and we've done the other things that were required of us by the probation and parole that's requiring, let's see here, get my notes here. Required us to have smoke, fire alarms, carbon monoxide detectors, both upstairs and downstairs, an emergency evacuation plan, and a map. Okay, the state has a program to bring convicted felons after serving their time back into the community. I help with that transition. I want to help bring men out of prison and get them started on their new lawful lifestyle. They're entitled to that by law and by human nature. Being who we are, we try to lift people up. We've all made mistakes. We learn from them, and we can correct our mistakes and become a better asset to the community. The men involved with transitional homes must adhere to a strict set of house rules, those are ours, and probation rules. These include a 10 p.m. curfew, no outside visitors, and mandatory employment, which these are just a few of them. The probation has a long line of things, which our house rules have the same thing. It's important to keep in mind that any violations of these immediately sends these transitionals back to prison. No questions, no asked. I'd be happy to answer any other questions when the time comes.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. I do have some questions, if you wouldn't mind.
Say it again, sir.
Back to the application itself. So you worked with local governments around the state of Washington, and so you've had a great deal of experience of making application for development projects.
No, I dealt with water retention up there. I worked for a company. Our job was to go in because, for example, like Seattle, we had a big piece of property, they wanted to blacktop it. And it got denied because there was no place to store the water. If you can't store it, you gotta let it go down in the ground. And, but no, it wasn't an application like for transitional use.
Okay. My mistake. Well, the concern I have with the application is it is incomplete. The site plan is, as I pointed out, an aerial photo that really has no markings, dimensions, or scope. I have not seen an elevation. I don't think you have plans to change the exterior.
No.
Which would probably be a good thing. You know, this is a structure that does need upgrading and maintenance from the appearance of it. But with the special use permit, this is the point where, you know, you get the approval or the denial or the continuance. And there's not enough information here for me to make that kind of decision. What concerns me is that these staff reports are put out a week before the hearing date, and which gives the public an opportunity to review the proposal in its entirety. I don't think it's there. What the lacking we discussed, the landscaping plan. The other thing is how does the operation work? You know, as a neighbor, what would you see? comings and goings, hours of operation, staffing, uh, these kinds of issues with the actual function of the land use is. And there's no information on that. And this is the kind of information required to make some kind of reasonable decision in a hearing like this, that it has to be before the public. I see none of that.
Well, I'll be the first to say that this is my first time dealing with the Caldwell City and Planning, and that's why I met with Stephen Voss, and then, of course, Mr. Jones had contacted me by phone, and we talked a couple of times, but the purpose of me meeting with him and having him review my application was if it was complete. And I apologize for not questioning him, because both of them seem to be pretty proficient at what they do, and that's why I went with that, okay, if this is sufficient to present this to the hearing examiner, then it's sufficient. If there's things that need to be changed there or to redo, then I'm more than willing to do it. I just need to know how to follow that. And as far as the inner workings on how that works with probation and parole and those types of things, is that something that you wanted me to respond to now? Is that, I can't remember if that was a question, because I thought there's two questions there.
Well, it's just a statement, really, that there is nothing in the application that's before the public to indicate how this thing would operate. And that's the essential piece of information that both me as a hearings examiner and the public would have to evaluate the land use.
Right.
We're here, it's a land use decision, and we don't have any clue as to how that land is going to be used, other than there'll be 8 people in there.
Right.
That's bare minimum. The other question being the status of the building code, which is if it goes to an R3 status, it's one thing, and R4 status, it's another thing. Excuse me, which could have great ramifications for your business plan and for the integrity of the structure to ensure that it has the proper safety and attributes that are required of the building code. And with this type of application, I would like to know that up front.
Okay.
There's no information. Does it meet the building code? And I don't know if it's even part of the process. I have not looked at one of these cases before as a hearings examiner. I have looked at dozens of them as a planner in my years doing that job, and there's always a more complete application showing operation times, personnel, landscaping, parking, all that. I have none of that information. The public has none of that information.
Yeah. Well, my visit that I paid to the planning and zoning was for that purpose. What is it that you guys need? And they told me the information I needed, put it together, and I brought it in, physically brought it in, spent 30 minutes with Stephen. Then Mr. Jones got it, and I apologize that was never told to me, because I'm not trying to skip anything here. I'm just trying to learn what's required for City of Caldwell. And so if that stuff is needed, then I'll get that put together.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to note that. Thank you very much for your testimony. You'll have a chance for rebuttal. And with that, I move to those who have signed up to testify.
All right, thanks.
And next on the list, Tammy, Ditbar. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with that.
Tammy Dittenberg.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please. You have 5 minutes.
Mr. Hearing Officer, my name is Tammy Dittenberg. I live at 2220 Arlington Avenue in Caldwell, Idaho. I have lived in a 3-mile radius for about 37 years and a 25-mile radius for 64 years. Was born and raised in Caldwell. I am not, and I never have been, and not in my backyard person. In 64 years, I have never had a say over who my neighbors were. Not who moved in next door, not down the street, not around the corner. I have good neighbors. We've had bad neighbors. Right now, we live in a 2-block-long street, and we have retirees, executives, preachers, a judge, laborers, disabled people, people who are self-employed, and I didn't get any say in any of them moving there. We have felons in our neighborhood, and I know that partially because on more than one occasion, I've had a bounty hunter show up on my doorstep with a picture of someone and say, have you seen this person going in and out of this particular house? Some neighbors have moved families and other individuals into campers and rooms and garages, and they did not ask my permission for any of those things. Within 3 blocks of 518 Denver, there are at least 3 large estate homes turned into apartments that advertise constantly as felon-friendly. None of them have 12-step meetings on site, none of them have supervision, none of them have programming, and they have no services for the individuals who live there. The best thing we can do, in my mind, to lift others is to wrap them in services that meet the needs of the moment. All transitioning felons face uphill battles. Those discharged into the community to fend for themselves are most at risk. Those who transition in residential areas while wrapped in services near bus routes, courthouses, law offices, probation, they stand the best chance. These are human beings. They are fathers, they are sons, and they are brothers. We are inextricably linked to them in our community and our neighborhoods. They deserve safe and stable housing as much as anyone else here. And I also want to be on the record as saying that if this house were proposed next door to me, I would be standing here saying the same comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, we have Jose Salcida. Ms. Salcida?
Thank you, hearing examiner Eggleston, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for showing up. My name is Jose Salcida. I am a Caldwell resident, was born and raised here since 1974. I am advocating for my mother, Micaela Salcida, who lives at 511 East Chicago Street since 1972. So this year makes 50 years that she's lived at that residence. I grew up in the resident in that house and in the neighborhood, so I'm very familiar. As Mr. Spagnola said earlier today, he was a police officer. I too was a police officer in Caldwell as a reserve officer in the mid-90s. So I know firsthand everything about the community. I'm a graduate. I have 2 kids that live here, and I want to be a voice of opposition for SUP 22-000023. I have a few questions, well, not a few, I have a lot of questions, most of which were echoed by you. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to have some questions that maybe he can, Mr. Val David Harris can answer during the rebuttal with Xerof Incorporated. My very first question is, what kind of expertise does Mr. Harris and Xerof Incorporated have managing transitional homes such as this? During a September 6th meeting, this question was raised, by a resident, a local resident, because they had a meeting that was sent out for the public for people to voice concerns of the surrounding people within the 300-foot radius. One question was what I exactly said, and allegedly, and I'll say allegedly because I wasn't there, but there are people in this room that could speak to this. The answer was none of your business. My question also is, Xerof Incorporated just recently filed on August 29th, 2022 this year through the Secretary of State as a business. So Xerof has been in existence for less than 3 months. So these are questions that I have for the applicant as far as, again, what his expertise is, background, and knowledge in doing this. I have quite a bit. I have the application right here. What type of transitional home is being proposed? Is it a level 1, 2, 3, or 4? Now, if he has any expertise, he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Level 1 is a peer-run home. Level 2 is a house manager. Level 3 is transitional housing. organized with a clear hierarchy, and level 4 is a service provider residency. He mentioned that there will be rules set up as he put forth in his project narrative, which is pretty ambiguous as far as what type of house. It basically says the project is to provide transitional housing for individuals who have met their debt to society. This is ambiguous at best. What is the definition of low term, mid-term, or high or low risk, mid-risk, and high risk? What kind of felons are going to be included in this? What kind of structure is being set up? There's a lot of different reasons why something like this shouldn't be set up. This is a neighborhood that is bordered, I would say, from Centennial Way, the freeway, 10th Street, and the railroad tracks. This is a largely marginalized neighborhood who people who don't feel that they have a voice when something like this happens. I took it upon myself to start a petition for it, and I was able to speak with the vast majority of the residents within this area. Unfortunately, my own time constraints and weather didn't permit me to actually speak with everybody in question, but every single resident within that did sign my petition is completely against having this here for a variety of different reasons. Now, I agree with Tammy Dittenberg that these are people, and nobody's questioning a group home. For instance, there is already a group home established at 609 East Denver, which is all women's group home, and I question the wisdom to the hearing examiner and possibly the city council in putting a transitional all-male felon home in such close proximity to a group home at 609 East Denver Street. It just speaks to a recipe for disaster for me. I'm also talking about recidivism rates within the people reentering community that are transitioning from out of the prison system to being parolees. There is a 56% average of people that reoffend, typically within 6 months and within 500 feet of their residence. So I don't want to take a 56% chance that something might happen to my mom. There's a lot of other things I probably have in this, and again, the
Could we wrap
notes
it up, please?
that came, I'm sorry,
Could we wrap it up, please?
is my time up?
Yes,
Oh, okay, I will defer. Thank you for your time.
thank you very much. Next I have Mr. John Carey.
John Carey, I live at, I own an address there on 517 Denver, right across the street. And I've rented to Rebecca here for 10 years, and she's a single wife, or single person, and she's kind of leery of that house being there.
I just don't feel comfortable living right across.
Let's do one at a time, please. And he'll have his say, and you can have your say. Did you sign up?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I was going to mention about the other place down on 609 Denver Street, in the proximity of that 518 being that close, I guess that's about all I got to say.
Thank you very much.
My name is Rebecca Straight, and I live directly across the street at 517 East Denver Street. I just don't feel comfortable living right across the street from 8 felons. I have grandchildren, a great-grandchild that visit often, so and I don't really feel that comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, I'm sorry, I skipped Mike Denver.
Want to hear me now?
Yeah, I missed it on the page. Would you like to testify? Yeah, I'm sorry, I skipped over that. I didn't see that.
So
Please
my
do
name
me
is
a
Mike
favor.
Dittenburn. I'm the Director of the Housing Authority for the City of Caldwell. I've been the Director of the Housing Authority for 16 years and have dealt with a variety of housing issues. Prior to my occupation as the Director of the Housing Authority, I was a Special Needs Officer for the state of Idaho, and I developed and managed and put into place what we call special needs housing, housing for victims of domestic violence, housing for children aging out of foster care, housing for veterans, housing for people transitioning out of prisons. And I did that for approximately 7 years. And I am the principal author of the state's 10-year plan to end homelessness. And part of that 10-year plan to end homelessness included a variety of housing options for a variety of people who might be challenged in today's economy. Now, I wrote the 10-year plan to end homelessness in 2005, so granted, we have no homelessness today because we're now 17 or 18 years down the road, so, but we know that that's not true. We know that there's a number of challenging housing issues facing everyone today. And then prior to that, I had a career in law enforcement with the Boise Police Department between 1993 and 2000, and we dealt with some of the challenging issues facing growing communities such as the city of Boise, and what we do when we open up historically overvegetated rivers, the Greenbelt, and what happens when we start developing parks and we start taking previously overgrown and overvegetated areas and making larger Catherine Albertson's parks and larger, Thelma Morrison parks. What we do is we start finding people, and then that becomes a big challenge. And then what do we do with the people that we find? So, having said that, let's talk about Idaho in general. Idaho in general is a pretty conservative state, and I like the state that I live in. We believe in the rule of law. And the rule of law is passed down to you, who makes a decision based upon law and findings of fact. And based upon your opinions earlier, you may not have all the facts that you need to move this forward. So thank you for hearing everybody. But part of that rule of law is what happens when people have paid their debt to society? What happens when they've satisfied their sentence? What happens when they are entrusted by the government to re-enter society? They're among us. They're among us everywhere. My brother-in-law, my brother, maybe me, we're everywhere amongst us. And I would bet that if we turned around and look, if a third of our population has a criminal background, we'll probably see about 15, 7 or 8 people in here probably have a criminal background of some sort. And they were all given a chance, all right? We have a housing problem, a definite housing problem. But I can tell you from law enforcement and from my employment at the state in the 2000s, early 2000s, is that when people re-enter housing from our criminal system, they are better served if law enforcement knows where they're at. Nobody questions the recidivism rate. But when you have a recidivism rate and they're living in an overgrown, overpopulated, overvegetated area, they can't be found and they can't be held accountable. If they're living in a house or they're living in an apartment or they're living in a halfway house somewhere, they can be held accountable. The recidivism rate is better addressed when we know where the people who are trying to be integrated, being reintegrated, live. Now, the applicant probably neglected to put together something that you need, and we call this in the housing area an occupancy standard. And the occupancy standard is, this is what we will tolerate, and this is what we won't tolerate. And that might be beneficial for the applicant to have that. And maybe he already has it. But, so that's all I got to say about from my housing authority job. Okay, let me take my badge off here, right? And let me talk with you from Mike Dittenberg, who lives in a neighborhood. And you know what kind of people I don't like in my neighborhood? and I want you to take this with every bit of irony and facetiousness that you can, right? I don't like the old people in my neighborhood. Why? Because their irrigation systems break, they don't fix their lawns, they always call me, ask me to fix their washer and dryer. I spend a considerable amount of my time helping the elderly people in my neighborhood. I don't want them there anymore. I have single moms in my neighborhood. You know who's at my house all the time because I have a swimming pool? All the kids of all the single moms in my neighborhood. I don't want the single moms in my neighborhood anymore. They're just clouding the streets, they're just packing, you know. I have a number of people who don't speak English, and I'm tired of them asking me for things, and I don't understand their language. I just wish everybody spoke my language. The truth of it is, we have a diverse community for a reason. We learn to tolerate people. We learn to put up our own personal boundaries. We learn to be good neighbors. We learn to interact with our neighbors. And in some cases, that might be calling the police. That might be helping them. That might be doing whatever it is that we need to do. I think the applicant's application is noble. We all have criminals in our family. We all have people who have been given a second chance in our family. I've been probably given 10 chances my whole life. From my careless, behavior as a college student to everything I got away with that I should have been criminally charged for. My life has been pretty blessed. I would suspect that most people's life in here has been pretty blessed. And you know what we need to do? We need to consider a person who is compassionate enough to provide an opportunity for people to make a change in their life. The bell went off. I apologize. I'm going to put my badge back on. As the director of the Caldwell Housing Authority, we need to provide housing for a large population of people. Criminals entering the housing market, children aging out of foster care, single moms that can't afford to find affordable housing. It takes all kinds of housing to make a good community. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate that. So next, have Julie Yamamoto.
Julie Yamamoto, 2619 South Willowbrook Place here in Caldwell, speaking on behalf of a resident that lives on Denver Street who wasn't able to be here because she works, and as a citizen as well. I am not here to judge whether people deserve a place to live or not. I find it a worthy cause anytime somebody has compassion and mercy, but I look at as your job here, what does the law say and what we are rule of law, and so are we following that? You already have had some of those same questions, so I'll try not to bring those back up. But I just, first of all, just when you look at to say, does it fall under a single family home, and say, I can honestly say that we could make the case? Well, 8 unrelated people to me doesn't make that case, and I think that that is definitely a change of use and is precisely why a special use permit is being sought. And then I would look at Idaho Code Chapter 67-6508. I will not read it, but it speaks directly to number 1, that it would not cause damage. I think when it says that has there actually been an analysis of provisions which may be necessary to ensure that the land use policies, restrictions, conditions, and fees do not violate private property rights, adversely impact property values, or create unnecessary technical limitations on the use of property or analysis described or for the purposes. So, and I'm looking specifically at property rights of the people who live there now. Then I would say that if we are looking at why it would be rejected and how much weight, I appreciated your question as to how much weight do you give to the school district who's charged with our, arguably, I guess, but not to me, arguably our most priceless possessions, which are our children, and they're looking for the safety, and they have asked for denial. I think that is the strongest case, that if the school district, which by their own admission has not been the norm to ask for a denial, are asking for the denial on the basis of safety. And if you have a son who's asking for the safety of his mother, this is going beyond, we need to not just take care of the 8 individuals who we want to provide housing for, but for all the people who live in that area. And with that, I'm glad I am not sitting in your chair, but I appreciate your willingness to listen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Yamato. Next, we have Crystal Hernandez.
Haven't done this before. My name is Crystal Hernandez, and I live on 600 East Denver Street. And I would, sorry. I'm opposed to the project because it affects my family and our neighborhood personally. Our neighborhood has come a long way, and each one of us has done their part to try to keep our street safe. My family is growing here, and I believe that if this project wants to continue, that they need to move it out of our residential zone. Our neighborhood does not need to be the only answer. We are already in a disadvantage being located in a crime and minority and low-income area. We already deal with this. My concern is the possibility of putting our children in danger, and it'll be because the city is allowing this allowing this to continue without thinking of the law-abiding citizens living there. My children, I'm gonna be having 3 now. There is about, I wanna say 10 children that get picked up every morning and dropped off right in that corner. All these children's parents already come out and make sure that the cars aren't crossing, that are respecting the children crossing and stuff. There's a lot of little kids that are walking on their own to their house. My concern is, what if they're loitering out and these children go by? There is just even the simple of interacting with them. We do have that halfway house that's there. There is loitering, or at least there has been from that house. We just keep an eye out. I think up to that, and it being as well, these women are, I'm not sure exactly how many, I believe it's like maybe 4 or 5. These women do keep to themselves. They have, at least to me, in 3 years that we've been there, have not caused anything. But you're talking about putting a men's facility or halfway house, transitional home right next to this. It doesn't seem right as well. That's all I needed to say.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, I have Kimberly Castillo. Okay. Next is Salvador Curiel.
Hi, my name is Salvador Curiel. I live at 600 East Denver. I oppose the house that's at 518 East Denver Street. It's a 4-bedroom house. It's gonna hold 8 inmates, or offenders. They're no longer inmates when they come out. I've worked at Idaho Correctional Facility before, and the bunk bed idea is probably the worst idea that could ever happen for inmates. They have so many politics in the prison, like gangs and different offenses. And are these offenders gonna have a background check before they get in the house, or will they be able to put 2 different gang members from different gangs in one room? They said they've been there since August, and I started my grass and my fence and my roof in August. And obviously, they have more money than I do. I have two little girls. I would hate for anything to happen to them. Yeah, oppose the inmates living next door to all these older people, young kids. Next door to that house, there's 6 little kids that play soccer every day, snowing, raining, sunshine. Are they gonna build a fence around it? It's not that hard. How are they gonna add cameras to the house to protect the neighbors and the inmates? I have friends in probation and parole. They meet with their offenders once a month, and you do not have constant police routine down the street, even though they're right here. I don't know. I oppose the idea of having a transitional home. Because like they said, 56% of inmates that get released reoffend. Yes, everybody has the, you know, the right to make their own choices, and if they do good or bad, you know, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. It's just, as a parent, I look at it. And as when I worked in corrections, I look at it, they're very crafty. They hide stuff in plain sight, looks normal. And who's gonna be watching? Nobody watches those houses. The inmates have to live like roommates. They don't have a person there to take care of them. They don't have a police officer standing outside. They don't have a probation officer that goes every day and checks on them. And they have to go and get their own job. They have to go, and it's very hard for them to get a job. Once they can't get a job and life becomes difficult for them, who are they going to hit? The little old lady in front. The little old lady on the side. We'll get these little kids right here to sell stuff for us. No one will know. That's how I look at it. That's why I oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next on the list, we have Barbara Laura.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Lara. I've lived on Denver Street since 1983. I love to go out and water my flowers, water my grass, take care of my yard. I'm going to feel very uncomfortable with 8 men living across the street from me. I go outside and play with my grandkids. I'm not going to be able to do that if you give them the special use permit. I'm going to be very uncomfortable. There's kids all the time riding their bikes. They're not going to be able to do that anymore. They're not going to be able to catch the bus stop. We're going to be very unsafe. We're very scared. We don't want them in our neighborhood. They can go in a commercial area, but not on our street. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next we have, well, I have Selena SC, but you didn't check whether to speak. Would you like to testify? Selena? Diane? Okay, thank you. I have signed up Yasmin Ramirez.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Ramirez. I live at 417 North 6th Avenue, just
Oh,
Just,
yes, step in the mic, please.
oh, I live at 417 North Sixth Avenue, just next to the 518 East Denver, which is gonna be, I mean, um, so, I'm very concerned about it, about this possibly project. So, 100% against it because, I have an 18-month baby girl, 8-year-old boy, and sorry, I'm not used to speak in front of people, but okay. And I have my nephews coming to my house frequently, and they live pretty close to my house. And my neighbors, most of them have kids, and we are worried and very scared for. Mm, I mean, we're not judging the transitional guys, of course, but we don't know exactly, what kind of people they are or how come they were in jail. So we um I really feel unsafety for my kids. And my dad, he's suffering from cancer, so sometimes my kids they want to play outside, and he also likes to be around the area outside, and we're not sure if they are people who likes to smoke a lot or not, or I don't know if they have some kind of bad habits. Um, so, or if they like to be naked, like without their shirts, and it's not appropriate for kids. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, it's just we have a lot of teenagers too in the family, so they might be distracting anyways. So, and most importantly, it's we we worry about the safety for the kids too. As and like my neighbors say, the bus stop. There's a lot of buses that stop on the streets. Almost every street um, has a stop, a bus stop. So, and so we are not sure if this is a good idea though. Uh, I was telling the, I was telling him if there was a possibility to, I know it's a good thing, right, to have this kind of project because sometimes I understand the people wouldn't rent uh this person because they check their background, right? But and I'm okay that some people have this kind of projects, but there's locations that are not um bad. That there's another locations that could be more appropriate for this project, and I don't think uh the downtown streets, because it's almost in the downtown, so could be a good idea for this kind of project. So, um, plus they might be having problem with parking lot. So, I don't know. I'm sorry, and um, I hope that this doesn't get approved. I hope that you consider all the neighbors' opinions and concerns, sir. We really care about our families and the old people that is living around. So I really appreciate your time for listening, and thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Next I have, Mr. Jeff Deaton, please.
Yes, thank you. My name's Jeff Deaton. I live at 1218 East Denver Street here in Caldwell. I moved here in November of 2014, and I can sit in my backyard and look at the Canyon County Jail. And when I first found out, hey, that jail's a tent, I thought, well, probably not the smartest thing, but okay. Well, then 2016, 2017, there were 8 escapes out of that jail. I thought, well, that don't surprise me because it's a tent. So you look back and you think, well, not some very smart decisions made for how things are handled within our community. Well, then you look and you see a bunch of semi-trailers put together for women's housing to the tune of $13 million for a lease. Maybe some better decisions could have been made for our money, for our community. Well, then I hear a house like this coming into our community again, just down the street. And it makes me think, is this another one of these decisions where discretion isn't being made? Something smart isn't being considered? And I look at Destination Caldwell, one of their mission statements is to make our community a more desirable place to visit, to do business with, and to live. That's a half-mile away from this location. Elevate Academy is a half-mile away from this location. Canyon Springs High School is a half-mile away from this location. My son used to go to Elevate. He would walk to school. He'd walk right by this house. I've seen numerous kids walking right by this house to go to school. And I start thinking, man, are we going to allow another decision to be made that don't really lean into the health of what our community mission statement is? And I can't help but keep looking at that number 1 line item on there that said the proposed use will not cause any damage, hazard, nuisance, or other detriment to persons. I think, well, what does detriment to persons mean? Do they have to be assaulted? That's obviously one. Is it a physical detriment? Is it an emotional or mental detriment? I think I've heard dozens of people here to say that they would be caused a mental and emotional detriment by this house being put in this community. Well, then, if you look at all the events that go on at Indian Creek Plaza, only an 11-minute walk from this house, there's every Tuesday uncorked food tasting, wine tasting festivals. There's beer fest over there. All kinds of stuff. It is a half-mile, something's half-mile away that offers all this stuff. The best place to be housing people that could struggle with some of these things, that could be tempted to go over and do something that they really don't want to do or don't need to be doing. So there's so many things going in to this that we need to make a very smart decision, not for just our community, but for the people that we're actually trying to help. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you for your testimony. I believe that's all of those who have signed up to speak. Did I miss anyone who signed up to speak? Okay, great. With that, I'd like to offer the time for rebuttal to the applicant. Mr. Harris.
Thank you. I've made notes to try to address each of their questions or concerns. If that's okay, I'll read through to stay on track here. The school issue, and as the last fellow just mentioned, those schools, and I even drove the one that filed the complaint And no matter which way I drove from the property to the school, it was just a little over half a mile. Of course, it's in a 2000 Explorer. It could be not keeping mileage well, but every way I went was over half a mile. That being in mind, these are all males. They are not permitted by our rules of the house and by probation. No visitors. They can't have their kids come to visit. They can't have their girlfriend come visit. And the way that we handle that is zero tolerance. If they show up with one or the other that walks in that door, they are back to prison by the next day. Point blank. By the way, that school that filed that, it's interesting that they're just 2 blocks away from that detention center over there. But our halfway house, that are people that are out on probation, that are governed by probation officers and our house rules, draw that attention, but yet they have that happening across there. I don't know where the jail is he spoke of that have people escaping there. I'd be concerned too. I want safety where I live also. My background for managing property, because that's what I did and still have in Texas, I have a 32-unit property down there. We did bring in people from parole and probation down there to help them get back on their feet. It's an honorable cause. It's the thing that we should do as humans. I feel good about it when I do it. Our property is a transitional place, not a rental place. It's a transitional home. To give you a distinction between the two, if we have people that come in and transition, get on their feet, get their job, and they move on out, then it might be 2 months, it might be 4 months. They go out, and we have the ability to help somebody else come out of the prison system to transition out here. We can all dislike it, but you guys have ex-felons that are living near you that are out of their probation, that they're living there. You just don't know it. Or if you do know it. But the point is that with the transition, we're helping to get those people on the right track and going. One stumble, by parole or by us, one stumble, prison. Next day, they're in prison. FYI, my father is a sex offender. My nephew, convicted felon. If it wasn't for transitional housing, my nephew wouldn't have got to come out when he did. My father died before he got to come out, so FYI. But the point is, been there and done that. I also served my time as a prison guard many years ago. Nonetheless, I've dealt with these people and I understand them. As far as the transitionals, we got to understand that these people have done their time and earned the ability to come out on parole. To stay out on parole, that means they've got a long list of stuff they have to do. So I'd like to present this to the people that are listening here is, so we rent out 8 beds to people that come in that have to abide such strict rules that at 10 o'clock they can't be outside, they have to be home. They cannot loiter outside. They cannot drink. They cannot bring drugs home. None of that. If they're caught, the next day they're back in prison. Point blank. What would you do if you're in their situations? You'd stay clean. The reverse of this is, so we don't get a transitional house there. Still got 8 beds to fill. So now we're going to rent out to the college kids or the single person or whatever that wants to come in there. And guess what? I have zero control over them. I can't kick them out with 30 to 60 days of going through court to do it. I can't tell them they can't have loud music. I can't tell them they can't stay out all night. I can't tell them they can't have people come. It's something to think about. When you're under control, when you're under the law, that means back in prison, or you're living on your free life and just enjoying life and partying up the neighborhood, I would be concerned about your kids. Give you an example of what I'm talking about. My brother's retired state cop here, almost 35 years. He says, the one thing I have advantage when I'm going out there, which he used to do narcotics, I know who the bad guy is. You don't know who the bad guy is off the street, kids. None of us do. And that's what scares me. Because when I go out, I know who the bad guy is. I only say that because there's some calming to me about this, that I'm helping somebody who wants to do it right, and if they don't, go back. Yeah, there's a recidivative rate, I don't know the term, but putting it back in there, it's a high percentage. And I'll be the first one to send them back. I don't want that person transitioning for 3 months with us if he's a troublemaker. And he don't get one shot, he doesn't get a warning. He goes back. Let's see. The people that live there, they're required to keep up the property inside and out. It's our property that we don't want them to destroy. Same thing. You don't follow through, you go back to prison. Pretty simple. I don't have to do any thinking about that. I can't be prejudiced by whether a person is a man or woman, or their religion, or their color, or their history. I have no right to do that. Whether I'm transitioning people or whether I'm renting out to people, either side of it, I can't, I won't, and I don't. Yes, we'll have cameras outside. We're not allowed to have cameras inside for obvious reasons. But if they walk through the door with somebody besides themselves, and after 10 o'clock at night, they're gone, back to prison. Zero tolerance. I talked to Oscar, who's over here, the parole and probation, had a meeting with him day before yesterday, talking about the parole officers. I said, can I expect these guys to be coming by, you know, back in the old day, they'd come by, drop in all the time or what have you. And he says, well, we got a big workload, but we try to have a minimum of every other week, not monthly. But the best thing that we got is a phone call. Make a phone call to me because somebody comes in late. I'll already see it on the camera. And I'll already made a contact with his parole officer, and he'll already be scheduled to go back out, back to prison. The job situation. Oh, they're going to go out and not get a job, and then they're going to here start loitering. They're going to do this and start doing all these bad things. They have to have a job. They got 1 week to find that job. Maybe 2 weeks if they can prove that they've been hitting it hard, but after that, they don't have a job, they go back to prison. I don't need somebody in there that can't pay the rent. Point blank. Rent's the wrong term. Can't support the program for their transition. It's important that they do that. That's one of ours and parole's requirements, point blank. It's interesting because I've been doing the inside remodeling over there, and I've been there on the weekend, 11, 12 o'clock at night. My neighbors, won't say who, got the music just a banging and a banging out there all night long at 1 o'clock in the morning. Transitionals can't do that. 10 o'clock, phone call, whoever's responsible or however many is responsible, go back. I keep hearing the same thing about, oh, there should be a better place for them to transition. A better place for them to be. They spent their time in prison, which is the best place for them to be until they qualify for parole. They've been in that better place than this. Some point in time, we have to put on our big boy pants and let these people come back into our society. We know who they are and what they've done. You don't know your neighbors and what they've done. I hate to beat that dead horse, but we don't know that. I'm sorry? Oh.
Yeah, time to wrap it up.
All right. They have to be tested upon request. They refuse a test, they're back in prison, by me or by the parole board. I'll end at that. Thanks for your time. Oh, I did want to mention that I realize that things weren't properly on what that is. I'm going to trust Alex to have that outlined for me, everything I need to have for you, and I'll get that put together and in the proper format so that you'll have a complete package then. You can make this decision on it, but I'm going to kind of depend on Alex to tell me exactly what I got to have there, okay?
Thank you for your testimony.
Is that okay that I do that way for that, what's required then?
That's a possibility.
All right.
Mr. Jones, you have a comment? Okay. So I'll move to the order of decision. like to preface my comments on this that, the Supreme Court has ruled on this very clearly, both the U.S. Supreme Court and the Idaho courts, that these uses are allowed in residential areas. That's not really the question before us. That's a given, and this is allowed as a special use permit. So the question before us is, does it comply with the requirements of the special use permit? And are there parts of this proceeding in regards to a land use that have satisfied the criteria for a special use permit? You see on the screen, these are sort of the bottom line of the both the Idaho and City of Caldwell statutes, the criteria that have to be met as a conclusion of law. There is, you know, I have complete sympathy for everybody in the neighborhood, but these kinds of uses are allowed, and we look at the particular part of the code, which was not stated in the staff report, 101303, the land use schedule for traditional neighborhood, and we look down to the item traditional home, which is allowed with a special use permit. So that's not the question, whether the land use is appropriate. It is appropriate, but it has to also meet the criteria of first of all, of the application process and the meeting the criteria of what you see here on the screen, the findings 1 through 3 there. In reviewing this, the first issue that I have is that crucial parts of the application that are required for consideration of the land use, any land use, are missing. Mr. Harris did provide a lot of detail in his 2 times of testimony, that very little of which is in the application itself. My primary task as a hearing examiner is make sure there is a clear record, and that also is part of the statute. This record to me was not clear. It is very perfunctory. It lacked, as I pointed out, a complete site plan. There are no elevations. There is no description of operation. A lot of things that Mr. Harris has pointed out, that there are strict regulations vis-a-vis the state penal code that does regulate the activities of the residents, and none of that was provided. We have no basis in this record in front of us today to evaluate the operation and the way that the state, the applicant, and the residents operate. I mean, this is a complete unknown other than the statements provided in Mr. Harris's testimony. My concern here is that still leaves us without a clear record that is before the public and before this body. And given that, I can't make the findings that you see in front of us. The proposed use would not or will not cause any damage, hazard, nuisance, or other detriment to persons or properties in the vicinity, according to Idaho State Statute 67, 6512 and Culver City Code 100304-2. Without the information in front of us, the evaluation is impossible to make. The other part of my concern is the discussion that we've had, the fact of the school district recommending a denial for this. As I've stated, this is the first time I've had the school district, Caldwell City School District, present in opposition to any land use. This is when their purview. I don't know if they have an elevated status as a government entity. The reasoning seems to be the same for them as the impact it would have on the neighborhood and the interaction of school children, people doing business in the neighborhood. But as I put the question to staff, what weight does the school district have in a planning decision? That's really a good question to me. I don't know where the balance of that is when you have a political entity recommending against that. Does that carry more weight than all of you in the room? I tend to think it does, because they have operational responsibilities in the neighborhood that address item 3 in front of us. The proposed use does not impact the ability of political subdivisions, including school districts, et cetera, to provide services. They're telling us they're not. There is some impact that they're not prepared to deal with. That's one way I can interpret this letter from Superintendent French. The other issue I have is we had a discussion with staff about the building code designation, and the level of evaluation in their terminology is an R3 or an R4 residential group, and that has bearing on the facility itself. Is this facility capable of either handling the use as is or through improvements to bring this facility up to code? That piece of information to me seems vital, and with a use that is controversial and critical as this, this kind of information should be known before making a decision whether the facility itself can accommodate the use. That's to me a primary incident, a circumstance that should be known going into making a decision. Now, having said that, there are many instances where decisions are made with a condition of approval saying that this will meet the code somewhere down the line. But if this doesn't meet the code, and say it's approved, it is rather futile in the sense that we've granted a land use, but it does not have the ability to either mechanically or economically meet that requirement. And given the statements I've made in this rather lengthy preamble, I can't make the findings of facts that all the codes were used in adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The proposed use is not fully understood enough to make a proper decision. And the conclusions of law that the hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case in order that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted with the guidelines of applicable Idaho City Code and ordinances. I'm not sure I can make that conclusion as well because of the incomplete application and staff report. And with that, also, my concern is what is the city's response to the school district and their concern of opposition. Um, based on those premises, the, um, the lack of ability to make the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby orders that case number SUP 21-000023, request by Val Harris for a special use permit to open a transitional housing located at 518 East Denver Street on parcel R 0208901500 in Caldwell, Idaho, in a traditional neighborhood zone is denied. And with that, I would state that you have the opportunity to appeal that to the city council, and I hope you do, because we do need some direction on these issues that I've stated, but in particular where the school district stands on these kinds of issues. And with that, I thank you for your participation and your testimony. And we will move on to the next case, the one I bumped down, SUP 22-8, request by EV Studio for development of 4 8-plex apartment buildings located at 7020 and 7104 Unique Drive in Caldwell. Thank you for participation, and we're going to hear the next case, so I'd appreciate it if you move outside, please. Thank you. And with that, I'd ask the staff to please make the report on SUP 21-23. I'm sorry, wrong one. SUP 2208. Faith Landing. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. Today, we have the special use permit for the Faith Landing Apartments. For this project request, it's approval of a special use permit to allow for 4 8-plexes, so totaling 32 units in the C3 commercial zone. This will be a continuation of the other Faith Landing Apartments. For location, we are looking at a combined 1.69 acres located on the corner of Cleveland Boulevard and Isaiah Way in Caldwell. This is north of the approved Canyon Village Apartments and adjacent to the current Faith Landing Apartments and subdivision. For zoning, we're looking at C3 service commercial. As of code right now, multifamily is a non-permitted use in commercial zone. There was an agreement made between the developer and the previous P&Z director and city council that after 2 years of trying to sell this land as commercial, there's 3 parcels originally, tried to sell those as commercial. If they were not able to sell those, they could continue the use as residential and continue the use as apartments through a special use permit. And that condition has been met. That 2-year period ended in February, I believe, of this year. For the comprehensive plan, we're looking at commercial service. The proposed density for this development is 18 to 19 dwelling units per acre. This is inconsistent with the 2040 comp plan, but as stated before, there is an agreement between the city and the developer. For surrounding land uses, you have Faith Landing subdivision to the north, the Faith Landing apartments to the west, and the commercial use, the one parcel that was actually used for commercial use, the name is escaping me at the moment. I think it's Faith Landing Plaza. They have a few commercials in there. And then to the south would be the future apartments that were approved not too long ago. Here we have the proposed site plan. As you can see, the 4 8-plex buildings with their landscaping. These buildings will be pretty much exactly the same as the existing buildings that are there now. Same elevation, same style, everything like that. The landscaping will also be the same. It's just going to be a continuation of what's already there. Public for the service and utilities, everything's already available out there. Everything's brought up. If there's any dilapidated sidewalks, curbs and cut or gutters, those will have to be replaced. For public agency, the engineering did not give us any comments, as the requirements that are necessary, the improvements. We received a letter from Valley View School District requesting denial as they're overcrowded. We've been facing this problem for a very long time, and it's been a strenuous issue throughout the whole state, I would say. We received no comments from the public in our, as of today, there's still been no comments, nothing late to bring in as an exhibit. We find that the land use is an allowed use with an asterisk because of this agreement. That's why we were doing this approval of a special use permit. It will meet all required setbacks, parking, landscaping, and building height requirements. It is in harmony and consistent with 3 goals and 4 policy of the Caldwell 2040 comp plan. It is also compatible with the surrounding land uses of multifamily and commercial, as it's just a continuation of what's already available. There are no objections from public agencies besides the Valley View School District. And as before, the conclusion of law for the approval is that would not or will not cause any damage, hazard, nuisance, or any detriment to persons or properties in the vicinity. It is not in conflict with the comprehensive plan that proposed, which it is, but with the agreement that's already been made, the city will accept this use at this time. The proposed use does not impact the ability of political subdivisions, including school districts, to provide services for the proposed use. And we stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I do have a question. I looked very closely at the correspondence, Exhibit A11, between Daphne Romani and Mr. Mapp, the previous planning director. I found it a little confusing, and I had questions about that. I just wanted to connect the dots here. I understand the situation as far as this essentially being the final phase, I suppose, of this proposal. But the Mr. Mapp stated in this letter that that your application, you say, after reviewing the 4 case files, I found that your application will need modification of the subdivision plat and the PUD. And then he goes down and enumerates conditions with that. And so the first question I have is, does this proposal, this SUP in front of us today, actually modify the PUD, and does it modify the subdivision plat? Those are 2 separate processes as far as I know. I guess, A, is it a requirement? And if it is, B, are we doing it in the proper manner and format?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, for these apartments, what we are doing now would be the appropriate course of action. Any other modifications that are outside of the deal will have to go through a plat change and PUD change. But with this use here, since it's already been an agreement between the director, all of the documentation might not be here in the staff report, as the previous director is no longer here, and the files were left in a box, essentially, and we don't have access to his emails anymore. So with the development that we have in front of us today, I believe this course of action is the appropriate course of action. That's the point of doing this special use permit, to make sure that we're doing the correct course.
Okay. We'll go with that. The other part of that, and this I don't really understand, but Mr. Mapp mentioned several times the relocation of the community center. I'm assuming the community center was destined to be on this site, but it's being moved somewhere else. And does that somewhere else comply with the PUD and the subdivision plat that's on record?
So with previous conversation, I've worked with the previous director with this, was that they wanted to move the community center to these parcels, which we said no. The previous director said no on that one. And so this was the compromise, that they could put the apartments. There will be possibly a future plan of moving the community center somewhere else inside of the development. But that would be with a different application, with a modification to their plat and their subdivision. With this one currently, the community center will not be moved. It is just to put apartments on this blank plot of land. So any other changes will have to go through a separate hearing.
Okay, so just clarify, the community center was gonna be on this particular piece of property.
They wanted to move it, but we were told they could not, and that's when this agreement was made.
Okay, so, but there'll be, another process to locate the community center within the PUD.
Correct.
Okay, so just, I just wanna make sure we're all, straight and narrow here, as to the process. Thank you very much. The letter from Mr. Maff is still rather ambiguous, but, and I would have been interested in seeing the agreement, whatever that was, or a motion from the council or whatever that would have been, to connect all the dots here. All right, it's pretty straightforward. The other question I had was in regards to the fire department letter. You feel that the items in the fire department letter have been addressed with this application, and that's all doable.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, we're good on exhibit PA2, the letter dated 10/7/2022. And then one thing that is lacking here is the elevations. I'm not familiar with the site, but it'd be nice to have elevations. Perhaps the applicant has that. You said it'd be similar to what's already there, but part of the, that's something we get to look at in the SUP that I'm very concerned about, the elevations and their compatibility. And did you get any information on the elevations? Do you have anything in that regard?
I'm double checking our file to make sure see if we got some.
Okay.
We do.
And then just a quick question for Mr. McDonald. Engineering had no comments. I assume because this has all been approved under the PUD. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Mr. Hearing Examiner, this whole area, the improvements have been already established all the way around the site, and so engineering does not have any comments at this time to add to the development.
Okay, so that what's on the books in the PUD stands for this development as well.
Correct.
Thank you. And I'd like to note that I just received an exhibit, the exterior elevations A-201, which I will label SUP 21-A-1 for the record. It includes exterior elevations, like 2 sheets of exterior elevations. Thank you, Mr. Jones. And I'm glad you noted in your presentation that they use as a continuance and continuity with the PUD that's already there. With that, I have no further questions of staff. I'd like the applicant to please, well, I guess we have Julie Miller on Zoom.
She's on an airplane right now.
Okay. And your name is Mr. Hurlis?
Yes, sir. Yeah, my name is.
Okay, C.W. Hurlis, please. make your presentation.
Yeah, I'm C.W. Hurlis with Avis Limited Partnership. My physical address is 461 North Cove Colony Way in Eagle, Idaho, 83616. Dear staff and Mr. Hearing Examiner, this is on behalf of Julie with EV Studios. We are presenting this narrative for the reference project as part of our SUP application. We are seeking approval for the development of 4 8-plexes to match the existing apartment development. A future project will include the development of a new approximately 7,000 square foot clubhouse facility to serve the residents of Faith Landing. I would like to address that there is an existing clubhouse in this development that is going to be continued to be used.
But not on this site, correct?
Not on this site, correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah. The subject property is currently located within the C3 zone of the Faith Landing subdivision. Both the proposed use and design of the new buildings are consistent with the surrounding area and will be constructed to match existing buildings in the subdivision. In good faith to help align with the City of Caldwell's overall goals for the Cleveland Boulevard corridor, we and the city agreed to a temporary 2-year hold, as we've discussed. Additionally, a separate parcel was built out to include the commercial that was talked about, and we are still waiting for final leasing on that commercial building. This project will complete the final phase of the Faith Landing apartment buildings, providing much-needed housing to the City of Caldwell's residents. Cleveland Boulevard will be enhanced with the lush landscaping added to the corridor's beauty. Residents will be welcomed home to spaces designed with their needs in mind. Open space throughout each parcel, as well as a community space dedicated to the Faith Landing subdivision, promotes an active lifestyle with access to outdoor activities and within walking distance. A note from me, actually, Avis Limited Partnership is looking forward to granting new and existing Idahoans a place to call home in the lovely city of Caldwell. This final apartment phase will bring an end to the 2-year hold lot agreement arrangement made between Roger Allen, Jerome Mapp, the city of Caldwell, and Hedrick Construction. The last vacant lot in this development will be enamored with the 8-plex apartment building designed for comfort and modern living. The lush and abundant landscaping plan grants a natural beauty not found in any other apartment complex, paired with a copious amount of open space, amenities that tenants and passerbyers compliment on the regular. With over 50 years of business in this great state, we are very excited and honored to provide a needed development for Caldwell and thank all who have made this possible. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to ask me, and then we can also email Julie directly if it pertains to architect.
Thank you. Do you have any other exhibits to add to what's in the staff report?
I do not at this time, no.
Okay. I have no further questions. Okay. Thank you for your testimony, and we'll move to the next individual signed up. Mr. Scott Hedrick.
Scott Hedrick, 1154 North Orchard, Boise, Idaho, 83706. I can just say that I've been the builder for Faith Landing for the previous 3 phases and would be for this phase. I was pretty instrumentally involved with Jerome Mapp in the negotiation of the 2-year agreement and the wait period, and along with Roger Allen and Ginny Allen, which is his wife, who's since passed away. But unfortunately, I wasn't aware you might need that paperwork. I have a substantial email train with Jerome in my computer. But the only thing I can say is it's a project that we've worked with Roger Allen and their family for 25 years on projects. These are all projects that they hold. They're not built to flip or do anything like that. They're built to maintain high standards. And I know Roger and Ginny Allen on the previous phase of 8-plexes on the boulevard, although we met the landscape requirements, Ginny Allen in particular came in and wanted to add substantial additional planning. And we added additional landscaping of about $40,000 in and above what was required. So I'm sure that that this same project would be the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I believe that is all. I have no further questions. Mr. Jones, do you have anything to add? Thank you very much. We'll close the testimony and move to the analysis phase of this proposal. The, staff report, there's a comprehensive plan analysis, section 5, with which I agree. I would like to, at this point, officially add Mr. Jones's presentation into the staff report. It completes that staff report. And then thank you for the elevations. They presumably are similar to what's there now. So, moving on to section 6, or section 5, I do support the comprehensive plan analysis of the staff. Section 6, findings and facts. The Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of the ordinance and is subject to conditions of approval. Section 7, the conclusions of law. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case in order that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted within the guidelines of applicable Idaho Code and city ordinances. Section 8, the order of decision. Based on the findings of facts and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby orders that case number SUP 22-000008, a request by EV Studio for the development of 4 8-plex apartment buildings located at 7020 and 7104 Enoch Drive in Caldwell, Idaho, on 1.69 acres located in C3 Service Commercial Zone in Caldwell, Idaho, is approved with the following conditions of approval. The conditions of approval in section 8 are as follows. Staff has provided conditions 8.2 through 8.7, and I have some amendments and additions to item 8.3, comply with code requirements. The Caldwell Fire Department will add, comma, stated in example PA2, dated October 7th, 2022, period. In add condition 8.8, comply with the site plan, exhibit A3, dated something, I don't have the date, staff will provide the date from that plan is submitted, and the landscaping plan, exhibit 8A8, with the date, period. Adding condition 8.9, the maximum number of dwelling units shall be 32, period. And with that, I close this hearing, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hearing Examiner?
Here, yes.
For those dates, it is 5/2/22 for the site plan and landscape plan.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And if you would, please, make the presentation for case number SUP 2224.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Alex Jones, Associate Planner, 621 Cleveland Boulevard. This should be a short one. So the request for us today is a special use permit to utilize the downstairs basement of the subject property as 2 apartments with the parking lot located at 1620 Arlington Avenue. For project location, this is 0.28 acres located at 229 East Logan Street and 1620 Arlington Avenue, parcels R01456 and R01454. For zoning, we are looking at, that's not correct, instead of saying R2, it should say HD. This is hospital district zoning. This part wasn't updated, but either a duplex or this multifamily use is allowed through a special use permit. The comprehensive plan designation is institutional. This is suitable. This is consistent with the comprehensive plan. This allows for living while also in the commercial area. Surrounding land uses, here we have the subject site. Currently, the upper floor of this building is is two medical offices. The applicant can talk about that a little more in detail. To the south, we have the parking lot for West Valley. To the east, we have another medical clinic. And then to the north and west, we have residential. For proposed site plan, here's the floor plan. There is 2 apartments, each with their own bathroom and kitchen. This will be at the in the basement, of course. We received no comments from the engineering department. For the fire department, they would like fire suppression system if the exit is below the level of discharge. This is something that the applicant and the fire department can work on once they are doing their commercial permits. We received no public comments for this development. We find that this is an allowed use of the approval of special use permit. It will meet all setbacks, parking, and landscape requirements. Staff find that it is in harmony consistent with the Caldwell 2040 comprehensive plan. It is compatible with the surrounding land uses of commercial and single-family residential, and there were no objections from public agencies. Stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I'm just curious, the parking being on a separate parcel, is there a requirement or is it a good idea to have some kind of cross-access agreement for that, or is it under the same ownership? I just like to make sure that was approached with eyes wide open.
A cross-access agreement could be made. I think currently they are under the same ownership, but if that is something that we are concerned about, that is, of course, something we could make a cross-access agreement. That's pretty simple. Staff sees no problem with doing that. It can also be a condition of approval if you would like.
Okay, I'm not really clear on that because it's under single ownership. It just seems to be, they could. Well, I imagine someday this lot will become something else. It's a nice sizable lot that could be developed into a doctor's office. Anyway, thank you very much. I have no further questions. And would the applicant please make your presentation? Matthew Johnson?
Yes, thank you. My name is Matthew Johnson. I'm an attorney with White Peterson, 5700 East Franklin Road, Nampa, Idaho, here representing the applicant. I'll keep it relatively quick. Generally, this is really a cleanup item. And 2 key points I just need to make. The first is just something that needs to be on the record. This is a pre-existing use. This building has been used in this manner with these basement apartments for years. It had been prior to my clients purchasing the property. The issue only arose when my clients were doing some updates to re-rent those out, and that's when this issue arose. And we spoke with staff about sort of what's the appropriate way to clean this up that addresses the concerns, and that's why we're here on the special use permit. So while my clients are willing to work through this process, I want to be clear on the record that this is a pre-existing use. I'm not even sure this permit is required at this point since they're just continuing an existing use. So we're not waiving that, but we're happy to go through this process in the interest of just cleaning this up in the most efficient way possible. To that point, though, really the only other comment we have is we think the staff report is in the right lines. It's appropriate for approval. We would request one minor adjustment to condition 8.5. And currently that reads within 12 months of the date of signature of the order of decision of the approved special use permit, a building permit application shall be submitted, so on. We would just ask that after it says a building permit application, that a comma be added and the words if applicable be entered in. And that's because from our discussion with staff, the next step in addition to this was to do a review with the fire department. And based upon the pre-existing use status, a building permit application may not even ultimately be necessary for this situation because it was pre-existing. This is already in effect. This isn't something new being constructed there. And so that's the request for the if applicable, because obviously we don't want to be required to file an application if it's determined ultimately not needed. And we sort through that with fire and staff as needed. So I don't know that a lot of the details. Oh, the question you did raise, the parking lot is under the same ownership currently, and I believe the concerns about parking for the residents of these apartments is actually adequately covered already by conditions 8.6 and 8.7, which required, 8.7 in particular requires designated parking spots for those. So in the event that parking lot were ever to develop in the future, this is obviously a condition that would have to be resolved. So at that time, a cross-access easement, if necessary, would have to be entered into as part of that transaction. Currently, because it's single ownership, I don't think it's necessary to add in that condition at this time.
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
Well, with the building code issue, I imagine that, you know, as you pointed out, this is an existing use. They acquired the property, continued the use, but does it meet the code? Or do we know that?
Well, so we're not exactly sure. One, it's a question of which code is applicable based at the time certain improvements were done. All my clients have done is sort of your cosmetic updates, painting and the like, which would not require a building permit. So that's one of the discussions we had at the staff meeting level and trying to work through them is evaluating which building code, which fire code would be applicable at the time these were actually in effect, since this has been an existing use for so long at this point. And so every effort's going to be made to clean up and cooperate. That's why my clients are willing to go through the special use permit. They just don't want to, you know, suddenly be, dealing with tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars improvement to come into compliance with code on something that was already pre-existing and has been in use. And the Idaho law is pretty clear on that. I know the staff mentions the idea that there was some non-use for a year. I think ultimately that fact would be in dispute. Ideally, we were looking to avoid that fight by going the special use permit, but that would be something that we might have to reevaluate if we get into the fire review and the building permit and there's some issue there, what under Idaho law constitutes pre-existing and what abandonment, but it's really not necessarily, we're hoping to mitigate and get around and not have to ever have that fight. So this is the first step in that.
Okay, yeah, I've seen a lot of these try to meet the code unsuccessfully because it's too onerous of a cost. You know, that's the reason I asked, but you have a reasonable understanding that it could be in the code and meet all the requirements.
It's on the radar.
Including, are you talking ADA? Is this like a, well, I guess that's a question for the building department. But anyway, so it looks like it's doable at this point. Excuse me, I'm running out of water. Okay, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
And we have Ruben Ayala. So you do not wish to testify? Okay, thank you very much. And having no others sign up, unless I just ask the staff, you have any more concerns, Mr. Jones?
Mr. Hearing Examiner, we have no concerns, and we are open to the modification that the applicant suggested to the condition.
Okay. And I think I have this 8.5, you wanted to add the phrase, if applicable, after shall be submitted. Is that correct? Shall be submitted, comma, if applicable, comma?
Correct.
Thank you. With that, I will close the hearing portion of this and move to the analysis. And staff has provided comprehensive plan analysis in section 5, with which I agree. It does address the comprehensive plan issues before us in this use and application. Section 6, the findings of facts as follows. The Caldwell hearing examiner accepts the facts outlined in the staff report, public testimony, and the evidence list. All adopted city ordinances, standards, and codes were used in evaluating the application. The proposed use is conditionally permitted by the terms of the ordinance and is subject to the conditions of approval. Conclusions of law. The Caldwell hearing examiner has the authority to hear this case in order that it be approved or denied. The public notice requirements were met, and the hearing was conducted within the guidelines of applicable Idaho code and city ordinances. Section 8, the order of decision Based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law, the Caldwell hearing examiner hereby orders that case number SUP 22-00024, a request by Ruben Alia, representative for owner Joel Rodriguez, for the approval of special use permit to utilize the downstairs basement within an existing building located 229 East Logan Street, parcel number R01456 in Caldwell, Idaho, as 2 apartments with a parking lot located at 1620 Arlington Avenue, parcel number R01454 in Caldwell, Idaho, in the HD Hospital District Zone is approved with the following conditions. The staff has provided conditions of approval in section 8.2 through 8.7. I accept these conditions and with the modifications as follows. In condition 8.5, within 12 months, et cetera, it shall read, the order of decision of the approved special use permit or building permit application shall be submitted, comma, if applicable, comma, for the special use, otherwise the special use permit shall become null and void. And item 8.7 needs a period at the end of the sentence. And with that, I conclude this hearing and adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much for your testimony.